Okay, so the first piece I'm going to do is a little bit of a fun one. So I have this poem called Real Man, like some of you guys might know it. And it's like basically a poem about toxic masculinity where I talk about I want a real man and like I say all these really bizarre things. So I decided to make a woman version of this about I am a real woman. So here is my draft of that. It's called Real Woman. I am a real woman, the perfect woman, the woman of all of your dreams. I'll fulfill every sexual desire you can think of and be super sexy all for you, all the while obviously being a virgin too. I'm basically like a sexy nun, a sexy prude, innocent but rude, but only in the right kind of ways.
I'm skinny, but curvy, athletic, but never too much. Every part of me or what I am just waiting for your touch. I'm independent, but you know, not excessively. I'll still need you, but also never expect you to pay. In fact, I'll take care of all of your bills, but still make you the provider to show me the way, because that's how it works, right? I never have controversial opinions. Well, no, I do, but only in the fun, cute kind of way, just so you can feel kind of challenged without ever being challenged, because at the end of the day, who wants a woman with a voice? I'm edgy and fashionable, but only in ways that make you comfortable. I carefully read your mind for the lines to never cross, and I'll caress the fuck out of your ego, so you know you're always the boss of my body. I'm a princess and a tomboy, unless that's not what you like. In that case, I'll find a secret third way to be whoever you want me to be. Yes, yes, I get it. Of course, you want me to belong to you, but also always act like I'm free. But one day, I'll wake up, the heavy chains of my resentment resting on my shoulders, where I've carried it all. And I'll look in the mirror, not knowing who I am or what all of that was for. Thank you. So.
Anyone want to kick it off? Okay, I'll kick it off. What made you? Oh, wow, that's a bit. What made you want to? What prompted it basically? I know you said that it's about toxic masculinity traits, and then was that just watching something from TV and you were like, oh, I'm fired up, I want to do it, or was it just from reading an article?
Yeah, well, basically my Real Man poem, I just kind of thought it was. So basically the whole message of my Real Man poem is that at the end of it, the man commits suicide, and I'm like, where did he go? But the whole poem is me kind of placing all these really ridiculous expectations, like I don't want him to have any feelings, and I want him to be all about sex and money and all of these things, which is meant to be like the voice of society towards men. And then in the end, you're like, oh, but one day he'll be gone, and we will all wonder what went wrong, and be like, what the hell happened? So that all came from just, I guess, the high male suicide rates, and I was reflecting on actually what creates that issue, like why are so many men taking their lives? And I decided to create that poem. And this was just kind of, I wanted to do the reverse. You know, why are so many women unhappy? Why are so many women feeling like they have to do all of these things? And I just wanted to present some of the like common contradictions for women in the same way I did in my poem for men.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've seen the Barbie film yet.
Yes, I have. I love it.
I absolutely loved it. But what your poem reminded me a little bit of the monologue that America Ferrera has in that, where she says, you know, you have to be slim but not say you want to be slim, you have to say you want to be healthy, you know, and that thing of contradictions, that women constantly have to be these diametrically opposed things and be them to not offend anyone.
Yes.
It reminded me of that, and I think it's very kind of current right now, having just seen that, but also it's just really well done, because it the way your poem is like very conversational, like you're having a conversation with a friend. So it just feels very like naturally flowing, but has a really strong message. So I really liked it.
Thank you. It was also meant to be a bit of like, like contradictions and kind of showing that it's all about the other person. Like it's not actually about any like preference, like any internal preference that it saw. And I guess that's kind of like my reflection of something I see commonly, that women are socialized to be very like for the other person. So yeah.
Real question.
Yeah.
Already marked, bro.
Oh shit. Look at that. I forgot it was there. So my question is literally, it's more, how does it feel to be in that state, more or less? To come to basically give birth to that piece. Like, how do you have to feel to basically come to that point?
Good question. Yeah, I think sometimes I do feel these kinds of expectations. I think like all of us women like feel these expectations that, let's say if you can't be whatever you are, and I think men feel that in a different way as well. Yeah, like you can't be whatever it is that you are, because if you're too sexual, then that's bad. If you're not sexual enough, then that's bad. If you wear this thing, it's criticized. If you wear another thing, it's criticized. And I think it just, I don't know. I would like to say that that like I'm above that, or I'm over that, or like, oh, you know, like actually I don't subscribe to that, but I do find myself in that kind of, oh, I need to be all these things. And I think it's definitely something I am continuously working on within myself, to listen to myself a bit more. What do I want actually? How do I want to be?
Yeah. It's funny because you have this list of things you should be and you shouldn't be, and it's like, it's like multiple choice, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, okay, yeah. I'll take that one. Okay, I'll be slim.
But then at the same time, be the opposite. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like, yeah, some of that came from my own feelings, but also from just like observing women and like, yeah, all of my close friends. It's just like so many similar patterns of like these contradictions and these expectations. So I think it came from both like my own feelings, but also women around me.
I think this comes from, sorry, taking it from the audience, but it comes from like, I have this opinion that perfection is something we can all reach, and that comes from acceptance, you know? Once you accept all your flaws, automatically you're perfect, but acknowledging those flaws doesn't hide away from perfection or doesn't take away from perfection, you know? Comes from the understanding of being without wax. It's like this thing where when they create like sculptures, if there's a mistake, they put wax on it, then they paint over the wax to make it seem like there's no mistake. So when there's a sculpture without wax, it's perfect, you know? And all human beings were just like walking floors filled with wax. And as long as we acknowledge those flaws and we paint over them, then we are without wax in a certain way, in a visual way, as long as we acknowledge and we feel that way. So it's like all these pressures that come, at the end of the day, you recognize those pressures and you tell them fuck off, and you're in a better place.
Because if you don't, you end up with the resentment.
Exactly.
And you kind of like, who am I then?
Exactly.
I'm always living from that perspective.
Yeah. No one can tell you who you are.
Yeah, that is true. Very true.
I do kind of like, when it comes to society prescribing these ideas of what's masculine, what's feminine, and what's what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman. Like, it's not like one size fits all, and obviously each person subscribes to a different idea or a different kind of lane of what that looks like. And when people meet each other, when they start relationships or friendships, they don't know what schema they've kind of subscribed to. I don't know if I'm using the right word, schema. Psychology. I didn't do well in psychology. But yeah, like everyone's got their own infrastructure of like what something looks like, and
their own blueprint.
Yeah, exactly. So when they meet someone, that person doesn't know what what their version is, and then when they don't meet it, like that's where the conflict comes, and then it's about kind of like maybe bridging that through an understanding of who that person is, and then just either accepting it or just, you know, you do have the option to find someone else that fits that if that is what you're attracted to. And then that's hard because obviously people want to be accepted for who they are.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the freshness of your poem. It's like your authentic truth, a declaration of who you are. I was wondering, like, if the 18-year-old version of you was to read that poem, what would they think?
Wow, what a good question. An 18-year-old version of me. I think she'd be very happy that I put that into words. I think she'd be very proud that I don't think the 18-year-old version of me was aware of these contradictions. And I think maybe she would be like, oh yeah, that is actually how it is. And I think she'll be kind of proud that I put that into words. That's what I think.
Yeah, so I was just going to say it's interesting the word blueprint came up because I've got a piece called Blueprint for Beauty, and it's the same concept of when someone comes with this blueprint, but it opens up that conversation of interrogating where these blueprints come from that we have. So we do have preferences and we are attracted to certain things, but what informs this conditioning and this blueprint, you know? And it is society's conditioning, you know, like a man should be an alpha male and super masculine and do all these things, and a woman should be this. And then when someone doesn't present that way, it kind of confuses the norm. So it's really interesting, and I think there's so much scope for where you can take that, how far you can interrogate it.
And like mother and father figures and your culture where you lived in and how that informed you of the roles, what you should do and present yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I think also like this poem for me was maybe less of like personal relationship kind of thing, and it was a lot more of like society's expectation. It wasn't like about one person's preference. It was more like if you were to take all these like common threads of like society's expectations of women, what would that amount to? And then just see the contradictions that are just crazy. Yeah, that's something I was thinking of.
I mean, what I'm gonna say, I really did like your piece because it's very interesting because like your piece is like playing the siren type, like you're playing the male's fantasy, like in a way he wants in a woman and everything. And to me, it's like when I hear that piece, I'm like, there's a lot of men say they want, but in reality, when they get it, they're like, it's like their disappointment comes down. It's like the face of reality is like, oh, she's my dream woman. But when you see it, it's like you're not say what you were. So it's like that illusion to the mind. So it's like your piece is like saying like every man fantasizes that, but in reality, that's not what he wants. So it's like wants versus needs are two different things.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess like it's not, like it's not real. It's like a kind of illusion, like you said, because obviously we are all, so much more than these like how we dress or like, sexual things or all like we're all like so much more. Like we're very multi-dimensional beings. And I think the patriarchal system harms both men and women. It's like a culture of control. This is your role, and this is who you are, and that's it. And it kind of like stops intimacy, which is more about like, who are you really? Like you, your thoughts, your flaws, your, everything you said, like your individual person. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yay. It's not so much a question, more as an idea, because I'm familiar with your other piece. I think it would be really interesting to see how you could put the two pieces together, how you could tie them from one to the other. I just think that'd be. I would love to see how you would do that, if that makes sense. Because I like how you've kind of covered both sides. So yeah, to see you put them together, I think would be really interesting. Just as a thought.
That's really nice.
Thank you. But I loved it. I thought it was a really, really, really beautiful piece. And yeah, I was like, yes, I feel every single contradiction that you said. So yeah, it was really beautifully done.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Oh shit. Oh, can I swear? All right.
You can swear. At this point,
It's better to ask for forgiveness. That's all I can say.
This guy's voice is just so amazing.
Oh, that's not works, man. Let's listen to the words, guys. The words. Let's listen to the words.
But the sound of his voice is.
So I'd say what I plan to do is like take us all on a journey of like, understanding and like human accountability to a certain level. So I'm going to start with like one of my favorite like themes of literature, which is like Dorian Grey. So I'll start from there. So the world I experienced scar-free. I've loved many. I've experienced so much, but still I remain unblemished. I keep walking forwards, never looking back, afraid I turn to salt. Even worse, dust. Ashes to ashes, dusk till dusk. Is that how it goes, or am I just obsessed with sunsets? all is fair in love and war. As the sun sets on another battlefield, I face my next opponent. Are they even opposition? Should I try diplomacy? Ask them what it is they want, or do I just brandish my weapons like I always do? Only then can they see the carnage behind me. They are confused as I see unscathed. Could this man have escaped such a battlefield? They do not know my secret. I remain unscathed because I refuse to acknowledge my crimes. So I draw my blade and I see the shock in their eyes, as it's the only thing with scars of war. Even in its sheets, it drips not blood, but the tears of my victims. I smile a smile so sweet they lower their guard. Mistakes they always make as I ponder, while I walk away from another battlefield. The past, my Dorian Grey painting. I walk through life unscathed because I lack the only thing that can scar and cause growth: accountability. That's it. Thank you, guys. Thank you, thank you. I'm accountable.
You know, I was doing sort of saying that piece right there spoke a lot of volumes. Like, it really did. I mean, I'm not like, I'm going to speak terms, like, in anime terms, it's probably some anime mindsets. No, but I like the piece, the concept as well. You said, like, you know, how you put tears in your victim's eyes. So it's like that level, it's like the mean, fear, and despise. But it's kind of similar to her poem as well. It's like the idea of society, like, about vulnerability and, like, contradiction as well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think for me, it came from a place of like, you're not doing wrong unless you acknowledge you're wrong, you know? And this feeling of like not knowing what you're doing until you actually take a look of your actions and you're like, okay, cool, this is what I've done. Is it wrong? Is it right? And you never grow until you actually take a look at what you've done. So that's where it came from, where it's like this constant feeling of like, you know, just going through life, not acknowledging like when you basically drank someone's water or you went into the fridge and ate someone's food and like, you don't care, like you've done it. And the only person who can basically feel the pain is the person who can see the empty plate in the fridge, you know? And that's the only...
That's a great
Thank you.
line. Use that line.
Thank you. Well, that's the concept behind it. It's like, if we're all walking through life in a battlefield, and we're all looking forward, we're not acknowledging what we've left behind, you know? And the only people who can basically see it are the people opposite us. And they're wondering, like, how are you fine? Like, all of this behind you and you're just, you know, okay. And you're smiling and they're like, okay, maybe he's not so bad. And they realize, oh, he's a scumbag.
So I'm interested to know, either before that poem, during or after, how did it help you with you kind of exploring your relationship, your personal relationship with accountability?
I think for me, I have this obsession with like reflections. So it's like looking at yourself and, you know, we know the classic vampire thing, you know, you're soulless because you can't see your own reflection. So for me, it was like that and the Dorian Grey thing where it's like he avoiding his painting is how he remained young and free of all his, you know, scars and stuff. So for me, that idea of just going through life, it's just like, am I reflecting? There's this weird thing I do sometimes. It's like, if I want to make a stupid decision, I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, are we okay with this? If I'm happy with my reflection, I'm like, okay, fuck it, you know? So it's that concept and that birthed the piece, more or less.
I don't know if you've read The Art of War, but I kind of got the Art of War kind of vibe from that piece. And as well, I love the pacing of it. It's got like this gradual pace to it that's like, it's not forced, but it goes in a steady way. And it feels as if it's like a painting as well. Like I'm in a museum and I'm seeing a painting, battlefield, people, bloodshed, horses, whatever, you know, a desert kind of thing. Yeah, like the way you recite, the way you tell the poem, you create these images, you know. I was wondering, would you be interested in turning that poem into like a play?
I would be. That would be beautiful to see, but I think like I'll be stealing Dorian Grey. But my own way. But I think my vision for it when I wrote it down was to have like something interactive, where it's like you're looking at a mirror and the words appear as you go through the mirror. Then at the end of the piece, you're staring at your reflection. So it's like you realize now you're facing your own reflection. Are you accountable for your actions? You know.
You could have like the original Dorian Gray painting as the inspiration. So Yomi did a similar thing on a Caravaggio painting when he did his one-man show. So part of it was inspired by that. But even though the original inspiration is that visual could then merge into a self-portrait, because your examination then becomes personal from that concept of Dorian Gray.
Interesting. Thank you.
I mean, what I was going to say as a side note is just like, listen to your poem. It feels like, in a way, you tell people to do their own shadow work, like working their inner child. Because I think a lot of people, like we talk about self-awareness, accountability, they're not aware of the damage they're doing to themselves, mostly, importantly. Because like we do damage to others, but mostly we do destruction to others. Because I see people as a reflection of ourselves. Especially when we go on as poets and we go on stage, like we're using the audience as a mirror and have a conversation with ourselves. So it's like find the answers that we're looking for.
Yeah, I think we're all mirrors of each other, and I think I think it's a very important topic actually to write about, accountability. I think there's a lot of like victim mentality in general. And I think we kind of have this addiction to being seen as good very often. I don't know if you guys can relate to that. Yeah, we're like, oh, I would never do this thing, or oh my God, people like, cheat and lie, and I would never do that. I think we're all capable of these things. But the more we're like, no, the more we're actually likely to do them.
Exactly. And I think that's the entire point of it, is like you're going to keep making the same mistakes because you're not reflecting. So if we're not reflecting and like staring at ourselves, not even in a literal sense like me, but just looking at yourself and saying like, what am I doing? Which is hard. It's easier to just go through life, but the moment you sit down and you say, look, what have I done wrong? Okay, let me take correction. Let me grow. Like growing is like, there's a reason why I say growing pains, it's painful. Sometimes you hurt someone, like acknowledging the pain you've caused sometimes is even more painful. It's probably equivalent. Well, maybe this is narcissistic to say, but is equivalent to the pain the person feels, and that's why you avoid it, Because if I acknowledge or I try and be empathetic enough to the stab that I just caused, I'm literally feeling it because that empathy is there. So if I avoid acknowledging the fact I just stabbed you in the back, it's like, I don't feel that pain. So we all have to go through life recognizing what we've done wrong to the other person and just accepting it and growing from that. No one has to forgive you. That's the most. But do you forgive yourself? Do you go to bed and do you wake up feeling, like there's no weight on your shoulders? So I think for me, that's mainly it. Whereas like I don't want to feel like I'm a bad person, so I'm going to look at my bad deeds and be like, okay, cool, I'll put my hand up. I was bad, and I apologize for it.
Yeah, something Anna just said about that I think we want to go through life feeling like we haven't done anything wrong or something like that, I think one of the things that I feel challenges us in terms of accountability is that for the last, I'd say at least for the last 5 or so years, that whole thing of being your authentic self and living your truth, I have a bit of a struggle with that concept, because I think that sometimes the way that it is put across is that as long as I'm living my truth, it doesn't actually matter what I do to anyone else. And if you challenge that, it's as if we're trying to box you in and suppress you and what have you. And absolutely, we do need more freedom to be who we are and not be put in the boxes that society, like your poem, Anna, or whatever, put on us. But I do think that sometimes that narrative of, be you, live your authentic truth, be who you want to be, can sometimes let us off the hook of either looking at our own selves to really see that even in that growing process of being you and living your truth, are you checking for your own self? Actually, are you truly being the best version of yourself? And it can also, I think, let us off feeling, because it's like, as long as I don't hurt anyone else, well, do you know what? there's no way you can't hurt anyone else because we are living together in the world. You cannot be responsible for how everybody reacts to what you do, because sometimes even with the best of intentions, do you know what I mean? Depending on where I'm at, I may still receive something that any of you do as a bad thing because of where I'm at. So you can't control everybody's responses, but we will have an impact on one another. So even that concept of I'm just going to live my truth, we're not living that truth in a vacuum where whatever we do won't have an impact for the good or maybe not so good. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, it's just something that was came to mind when Anna was sharing that thought.
I think the interesting thing is, I think if we look at human interaction as sharing a meal, you know, like if I decide to sit down and cook something for you to eat, and this meal represents my action towards you, and my intention, because I like spice, I put a whole lot of Scotch bonnet in that, you eat it, and it's too spicy. Do I acknowledge the fact that my intention was to just, you know, create a spicy meal, or do I acknowledge that this is too much for you? So I think we need to just acknowledge and basically understand who's coming to eat at our table, you know? And that's literally, thank you, but that's literally how I see it. Like, at the end of the day, you can have the purest intentions. Like the purest intention is feeding someone, you know? But you can do it wrong. You can put too much salt, and then people looking at you like, come on, man. It's too much.
Yeah, I think the key word is intention. Intention there. It's intention, isn't it? But yeah, I was going to say, so the last thing on your piece in terms of when you do your reflecting, because a lot of people in the times that we're living in now, reflection is all about the physical, mostly about the physical. Yeah, we live in a very superficial society, and so reflection and mirrors, because the theme of mirrors came up, and we say we are all mirrors to each other, but it's if you're tuned into that frequency of seeing it that way. Because so for you personally, I think my question is, when you do your reflection, when you look in the mirror, is the only reflection you see your physical reflection, or are you looking beyond that?
It's always.
No, it's great.
I'm the one that's not. No, how do I come up with a Okay.
I'm excited for you.
Okay, that's a tough question to answer. So I'd say, like, for example, I said, like, I literally sometimes like look at my reflection when I want to do something I'm not really 100% at, and I'm not necessarily looking at my physical self. It's like, can I look at myself and be happy with what I'm seeing? So it's more of a deeper look into myself. So it's like staring into your own eyes, and this brings us back to the sunglasses thing, you know, because when you see your own eyes, you know. Automatically, we can pretend, but the moment you catch your reflection, oh shit, okay, I need to do something different. I need to sit down. I need to compose myself, or I need to behave in a better way. So for me, that's mainly it, more or less. Where it's like, I look at my reflection and I'm like, am I happy? Am I happy with the day? Am I happy with who I am? If I'm avoiding myself by not even looking at my reflection, then I'm not happy inside. You know, we can be happy with what we are seeing outwardly, but if you look in the mirror and then you're just looking down, then you don't like what you're seeing inside, you know? You can't even look at yourself in the eye, more or less.
But also imagine if you looked in the mirror and you could visually see what your actions that day looked like.
Yeah. That'll be too much. That'll be too much. You'll see when I stole the meat, but it's fine.
I think just kind of bouncing off from that I feel as if what I hear as well when you're talking about how you take time to look in the mirror, that it's almost, or potentially, just this is what I'm also hearing or imagining, is that you doing that gives yourself a moment. It makes you stop. So whether it is about looking specifically at it, or whether there's even a subconscious going through, because we do so much and we don't often stop at all in a day or whatever, some of us, depending on how we live our lives. So almost could maybe feel like because the very fact that you stand in front of the mirror, there's things that start happening in your mind that you don't even have to be conscious of, because this has become a practice for you to check in with yourself. Do you know what I mean? So literally taking that time to be in front of the mirror gives you that pause, that moment, that breath or whatever it is to be like, am I good with what's going on today? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. You know the funny thing where with like, you know, our front camera, where you think you're looking banging, then you open your front camera, you're like, what the fuck? Yeah, exactly. So I think it's that concept of like, you know, constantly checking yourself, like, okay, are we good? We think we're good, but are we really?
That kind of makes me wonder about the use of filters and whether that filter is about trying to compensate for the ugliness that we see in ourselves, that we have to hide it behind like dog animations and like beauty filters and things like that. So like there's a lot of stuff on social media that tries to distract you from that, taking that time to reflect on yourself. So like whether that be chasing other things that you probably don't want, which are material, or trying to obtain some sort of beauty aesthetic that you kind of see that everyone kind of values and idolizes. So yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. And like, I think the mirror has always been a classical way, a tool to kind of be used as a periscope to see into your own soul. So yeah, I kind of thank you for that kind of piece, because I think that's actually something that I might have to take home, and I think everyone will take home to kind of like reflect on.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I think that's, for me, like the entire point of my poetry is like to cause like a sense of like, sit down and think and reflect. What am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? How am I doing it? You know, and just as poets, you understand, like looking at society and like saying, okay, what is a woman? What is a man? Like what's important, you know? And selecting the things that are important for us is like you said, it's like basically being who you are, true to yourself. In reality, if we just stick to what we believe is right, we're not going to be in a good world where everyone can be loving, you know, because everyone's selfish. Because inherently human beings were hypocrites. We're the most selfish beings in the world. If I have 2 wings left, you remember there's a film, I can't remember what film it is. It's one of these like classic 90s film where I'm gonna know he loves me if he gives me his last piece of chicken. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So it's that concept. Like if you're not reflecting and thinking about the other person and thinking about how society will perceive these things, you just be selfishly living life and just eating the last piece every single time, not wondering if the person next to you has eaten. Yeah, exactly. Eating the last wing. Eating the last wing. That's it.
I think touching on like maybe both of your poems, I think I see a lot of friends or a lot of people in general like that. I know not really my friends as well, but like people letting go of people or love candidates just because they're like 98% there, but they don't have that 2%. And I'm just kind of like, what are you doing? Like just because they don't tick this like lifestyle box. Like you can be ambitious in any type of job. You can be creative. You can be kind in any type of situation. And just because someone doesn't fit like the mainstream idea of it, they just kind of throw a whole relationship out or a whole person away because they don't feel that extra 2% or the extra 5%. And yeah.
Like, I think it brings us back to the piece of like being accepting, you know, of flaws in people and in ourselves. Like the moment you accept your own flaws and you recognize I can make mistakes is the moment you be able to extend that to the next person. So the people who are like, oh, this person isn't like perfect or exactly what I want, those are the people who have not accepted themselves. Yeah. You know, because they're holding themselves to this like weird standard, and in reality you've not met that standard. Then you're holding other people to it because you feel guilty with things like, why aren't you meeting the standard I have? You know. And just going back to that and just accepting people for who they are and realizing that we are perfect in our own way. And our imperfections are the very thing that make us human, you know?
I was gonna say for both of your pieces, I was thinking that they would be perfect if you read them in schools and you got the kids to reflect on them. You got the kids to interpret them. You got the kids to like you gave them like not a lesson, but like you're kind of infusing your interpretation on, you know, the world. Like you're impacting them in that kind of way. Yeah.
You go first. Do you have anything you want to say to that, or?
Oh, to this,
Yeah.
to the school thing.
Yeah.
I guess I'd have to maybe consider the age of the children with the with the sexual part, with the sexy non part. Yeah. Like A levels or something, or GCSE level, I guess. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. I guess when I think of schools, I imagine little kids, and I'm like, but yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, I think. Like year 10.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think it would be really, really cool and very useful.
Yeah, I think.
How amazing would it be in English lessons? You know, like in English for GCSEs, you have to study certain authors and poets, and then you have to analyse the text. And exactly what we're doing now, but we're doing it in person, is like, what did you mean in that line? What was your intention behind that paragraph or stanza? And imagining being able to interrogate Shakespeare sat there saying, well, you know, what was your intention when you wrote that? But we've got modern day Shakespeare's in amongst us. So that's why, like, I feel if they were to modernise the curriculum and the English curriculum in particular, and we had poets come in and the students were able to say what inspired this piece, or just, you know, break it down in ways that we're doing now, I mean, it's the best education you can ask for. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. And it would also like make them more aware, like let's say with the society standard thing. I think at that age you're not really aware of that as much, but like it's shaping you constantly, like society's messaging. So yeah.
I just want to say something to that because it's very interesting why I gathered this. Like for me personally, I focus on the word content. Like to me it's very important. We have this world where it's like you don't feel content, you don't feel happy. But I think once you understand the foundation of content, you just move forward. But what you say about, you know, with young kids and stuff, because obviously most of us are born in the 90s and 80s and beyond. Like, when we were little kids, I'm just saying that. I'm just saying, people. No, I'm just saying, like, when you were like teenager, you already had your own version of anxieties coming in. Like, you know, people say, oh, you don't pass this grade, you can't go to university, you can't do this. But I feel like now kids, when I see young kids nowadays, they got more worse than us because social media is more up in their face. Like, when we were little kids, yeah, social media didn't exist. It was not on our face. It was just like, the only thing we had was like, okay, do we make the grades? That's it.
I think the entire, like for me, how I fell in love with poetry in general was like in school. So that inspires how I write, because I'm trying to write like something that someone will read there, you know? And I think one of my favorite pieces that I basically remember is like Daffodils by William Wordsworth. And it's like one of those pieces where I read it for the first time. He was speaking about, you know, just walking down and seeing daffodils by the beach. And it meant so much more. Then he went home and he sat down and he kept reflecting on the daffodils that he saw by the beach. And I think for me, it's all about creating that level of reflection and people appreciating the life that they have around them. So that'll be interesting. I'll feel like I've made it if I'm in schools and then you know, and people are basically asking me questions, because that's the entire point of why I think poets write, you know, to inspire the next generation.
But, sorry, what you said was true about modern poets. Like us, like we actually has ourselves modern poets, but when we write poetry, we're writing from ourselves of understanding the world within ourselves. So that's why I say, like, I use the word mirror, because in a day it's like the audience is helping us discover things that we don't normally see in ourselves. Like tapping into the uncomfortable side of us, like the level of vulnerability, like going depth within ourselves. So would you say like poetry has helped you more understand yourself more, or just in general?
I'd say that's a tough one. I'd say yes, because I think the only reason I started writing was because, you know, it's like sometimes you feel so much, you're like, there's no one I want to tell this to, so I'm just going to write it down, you know? Then you write it down, then it's like, you know, then sometimes you feel like, oh, I think someone should read this, you know? then you give it to a friend to read, so what do you think? And you're watching them, you're like, do you like it? Then it's, oh, it's all right. You're like, are you sure?
kind of the same as like when you're a rapper. So when you're a rapper and you just give your friends your mixtape and then like, you can listen to it. Yeah, I'll listen to it.
Exactly.
And like a week later, like, did you listen to it? Yeah, I listened to it. Like, but you know they're lying.
Exactly.
Like, I feel like that with poetry. Like you give like you write a poem, you could like friends. I wrote a poem and then they just don't read it.
Yeah.
Unless they're poets themselves. But yeah, that's.
I think for me, I was lucky because like I had a roommate who was also into poetry as well. So I'll just give him a piece and be like this. Alright. And when he's done, I'm like, what do you think? Then he basically said, I liked it. I'm like, okay, if you like it, then that's fine. You know, it's always finding that safe space to share your art and to not feel like what you're saying is pointless. I think it comes back to the accepting yourself in like all the societies, because poetry is like very, very much subjective. It's what you'll be drawn to is different from what someone else be drawn to. You know, we all read different types of books. You know, and that's the beauty of it. So when you're writing something, don't be like, oh, it's not good enough or whatever. Like the person who's going to like react and like feel a certain level of connection to it exists, and that's the beauty of art in itself.
Do you guys want to start with your other?
Oh, my other piece. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to change the theme a little bit. Oh, clicking already.
Should we click in this space or is that weird?
No, I think it's nice.
It's perfect for clicking.
Okay, let's see.
We are pioneering this space.
Yes. Okay. So basically, this poem I wrote after a wedding. I went to a wedding last week, and it was basically with a group of people that I haven't seen for a while. And also, my dad died last year. And these people, I haven't seen them for maybe like 2 years. So I haven't seen them in that space. And there was a kind of like awkwardness that I could feel around that topic. Yeah, so I decided to write a poem. I think a lot of grieving people feel like that often. So I thought it was important. Yeah, so here it is. The wedding. I'm at an old friend's wedding, and I haven't seen this group since before my dad died last year. Death sits heavy between us. The unspoken layers of grief float somewhere between the first dance and all the fun parts of the day. Someone says, I'm sorry I haven't messaged you at all. I just didn't know what to say. Death sits heavy between us. Someone mutters a drunken, sorry for your loss, Anna, around midnight. A shot in hand, awkward eyes searching for confirmation that this is indeed the right thing to offer. Death sits heavy between us. Memories of that other wedding I missed because I was burying my dad that weekend get thrown around. Spilled over like red wine. So sad you weren't there, Anna. Death sits heavy between us. I feel oceans between the girl I once was in their eyes and myself here, now, by this table. The grief has made its home inside me, and there's a wordless loneliness that spreads its roots through each and every glance we share. Death sits heavy between us. Someone asks how I am, and I want to say my heart is currently burning a hole in my chest. But also, I feel so much more alive. Almost like the knowledge that it all ends and we all end has given me more life. My soul has been torn into tiny little cages, shoved into deep dark corners of my mind. My insides all twisted up in knots, sleepless nights plagued with thoughts and thoughts and thoughts and more thoughts. But I smell the awkwardness before it's even begun. So I say, yes, of course I'm fine. Yes, don't worry, I'm okay. I mean, I'm here at the end of the day, so I guess I am. I guess I am okay. The truth is, there are days I don't know what that means. Death sits heavy between us. Nobody knows what to say. Death sits heavy between us. Nobody knows what to say.
I'll start it off. I love the use of repetition. I wrote a poem about my friend that died as well, called December Rain, and it's a villanelle, and I have a refrain or a repetition that ends each stanza, and the presence of that is literally what you've kind of, that line that sits between us, heavy between us, like the fact that you have it constantly throughout is sitting between the words, and I love that idea. Also, like the idea of that presence amplifies the absence, which I really love. And obviously, that's a very hard piece to share, and I thank you for sharing it. In regards to kind of like the idea of transformation and being oceans apart from the person you used to be, and being in a space where people remember you as the person before the event, like to you, like how do you think, like is there a reconciliation between the people that have known you from before to the person you are now? Like is there a way of like them, or is it to you like they're still there and they've not met you here now? Like I don't know if I'm saying is making sense.
No, that's very trippy.
Yeah, like do you feel like they've got to know you now after, like, as you know, someone that's grown from this thing that's happened?
You know, I think it depends on the people and on the person. Like these were not very close friends of mine, but still there were people that, you know, knew me before, and then there was this whole event I missed because of the funeral, and they were there, and it was like all very, you know. So I think it kind of depends on the people. I think there have been people in my life that have, you know, known me before and known me after, and kind of acknowledge this space and like this kind of change. Like there is some kind of change, I think, that comes after these events, but it's so like wordless. It's so, I would say, liminal and so like, it's like such a threshold state that I think it's very hard to pinpoint. And I think sometimes people are so awkward around the topic of death that I receive it as they don't want to consider that there has been really big change. Yeah. So they just kind of act like everything's normal, and they're just kind of like normal, but then they kind of want to acknowledge it, but they're not sure if they should. And it's, yeah. So I think my answer is that it really depends on the person. It really depends maybe on how comfortable people are with talking about death, or maybe people that have experienced like deep grief themselves, on some level, maybe understand that.
I think everyone's just under the assumption that people want them to be treated as if, like, you know, they don't want to be kind of like overserved to like, oh, let me get you a drink, or let me get you a blanket kind of thing. It's just like people just assume that people just want to be kind of like treated normal, as if nothing did happen. So in a sense, like, people don't really know how to, you know, act around people that are experiencing that. Yeah.
So my question, sorry, before you go, like, my question would be, this is more of a personal question, to be fair.
Okay.
What would have been the best way to interact with you in that time?
I think, well, I think also with these particular people, I think it would have been maybe nice for them to message or acknowledge it before, but it was almost a point of like, we didn't know what to say, so we just never said anything, and it was a bit awkward. So I kind of feel like they probably would have been better if they said something before. So I guess that's one thing, but like you know, I think when something like that happens, I guess I think being just open to like talking about that at all. Maybe asking me how I felt about that, or you know what my life has been since that. Yeah, maybe asking more rather than saying something.
Making assumptions, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, too, there was one line you said in the poem that kind of got me thinking when someone said to you like, "Oh, I'm sorry that you couldn't be there." Like that line, you're thinking like it's kind of like Darius told me that it's just like kind of narcissistic. It's like, oh, you know, the way it was more important than your dad's funeral kind of thing. That's why I took it as. Not really as like, oh, I'm sorry, you know, for your loss. Is there anything we could do? Anything? So it's kind of like, while listening to that poem, it's like you realize some people are just not meant to be there for you in your lifetime, and you have to like distance yourself from certain people. Because when I heard that line, I was thinking that's kind of like, if someone said that to me, I'm gonna think, okay, your priorities is not there, it's somewhere else.
sorry, before you answer, like, I'm just gonna. Something just came to my mind. That line in itself is so beautiful in its simplicity because it reminds you that life goes on, in a harsh way. This person is literally looking in your face like you're burying your parents. But like, look, I was partying. You know, like why weren't you at the party? And it's like, okay, so life does exist outside this grief, and it's hard. But it exists, and I have to acknowledge that. And it's jarring, you know? It's kind of like being in a black and white movie, then someone just spills color in it. And you're like, okay.
You need to put it in. You just sit in front of
That's why in that phrase I compared it to spilt wine.
Exactly.
On the table.
Yeah, that poem was so beautiful. It was so photographic. I feel like you can read this poem in 5 years and you can still picture that. You can still picture everything you've said. And each line is like pivotal. And especially that line, death sits heavy between us. That line is so instrumental and powerful. I was gonna say, do you feel that grief is of? Do you think that grief is evidence that love exists, and do you think that grief is also evidence that grief highlights the importance of love?
Yeah, I do think so. And I think there's also a lot of like positive kind of, mindset things and a lot of love that comes from that place. So this is like my second experience with this type of grief because my mom died when I was 18. So I feel like with that loss and now with this loss, in both of these times, I think you go through such a, fundamental change inside, and you feel, feelings that you didn't expect to feel, and you feel so much, like so many different things, and you do feel that love as well. And you feel like that's like all of these feelings are somehow intertwined. And I think it also gives you appreciation for life and just knowing that, everything ends and everyone ends. And I think that kind of makes you love more as well, maybe. The people that are around. So, that's like my reflection on that.
Oh, yes. No, just I was drawing back to Mosh's comment. So there's this exhibition space that has this installation that has like a lot of tiny screens, and each screen is projecting a different image. And while you look at the installation, it feels like, or like that's how I imagine what life is, that I'm looking at this one screen and there's all these other simultaneous events happening. And I am now looking at the screen and there's all my friends are living or doing something else. And when I've experienced death, I feel like I have relived that moment and thinking, okay, where was I personally when the person died? And then when the news came into my mind and I'm like, okay, I can remember when I read the news or like I received the news of someone's death. And it's just like these tiny screens that just like go around in my head and mind all the time.
Yeah. Wow, that's really powerful visual. I do the exact same thing. Yeah, like it's like etched in my brain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you start like maybe like filling it with your own fantasies and imagination of like what it was like when that person died. Yeah. And like what was your own state of mind at the same time, and can you like draw any parallels between it?
Yeah. It's actually really cool to hear you talk about that. Like I haven't heard someone else talk about like that staying in their mind so much and thinking, what was I doing when the person died? So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you again for sharing your poem. And that just on the kind of topic of just that sense of you sharing how really nobody was acknowledging it. And I feel that, I mean, I've written a poem called The Phone Rang Too Early, because like growing up, when the phone either rang too early in the morning or in the very midnight hours, you knew it was bad news. Do you know what I mean? Sort of thing, right? And I write a line in there, it's like, they don't teach us this in school. And I think that what I haven't seen, there might be some cultures that deal with death and people passing better, but I don't feel, in terms of my experience, that we're often taught how to deal or respond to grief in terms of when you hear the news. It's, in my experience, it's often something that's not really talked about, you know, kind of like openly, or like when it happens, you don't know what to say. And, you know, as you get older, you know, you're told the phrases that you say, but actually really talking about what happens and stuff. So I think that's part of it, which doesn't excuse those people that didn't send a message. But that kind of came to my mind about how I just don't think it's something that we talk about enough. And I think that poetry can really speak into that space, because I think both for those who are going through grief, sometimes you're not even really able to articulate what you're thinking or feeling. And then when you hear either a piece like yours or someone else's, it's like it just, yeah, that's what it is. It articulates, or even not, it acknowledges that this thing has happened to you. And just even thinking about your line that death sits between us, there's this, in Christian circles, there's this plaque that used to be in a lot of people's house that like, Christ is the head of this house and the unseen guest at every meal. And that came back to me, that kind of principle, when you're talking about death sits between us, because I think that when you have experienced deep grief or loss, I don't think it's actually something that you ever move on from. You know, people talk about moving on sort of thing. I think it's something that as time goes on, you journey with it in different ways. But it felt like coming back to me that death is this unseen guest kind of at every meal potentially, or every conversation, and definitely in how you were sharing, that it's this unseen guest that we kind of all know is there, but we may or may not acknowledge, or we may or may not know how to do it. And yeah, so poetry definitely, I've seen it, I've heard it from other people, speaks into that, and or at least affirms for people this thing that I am grappling with and journeying with. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I want to follow on from that, because I think it highlights for us as poets the responsibility we have for opening these conversations up, that yeah, we're not taught at school how to deal with grief, or how to support your friends who are grieving, or at what point in life it's going to happen and what space you're going to be in, and all these things. So for you to be able to articulate that so beautifully, and like Shadwin, what you've said as well about how visual it was, like I was on this complete journey with you and I could see this whole scene unfolding. And yeah, it was really moving, really beautiful, and really sad. But I loved, you also spoke about the duality of someone asking you how you were and how that felt in your heart, but how you also felt so alive. Like all things that you probably would have liked to have discussed with people, but they're not in a space to hold you either. So yeah, it was just really, really interesting. And I hope you share it more, because it's such an important topic to touch on. So question-wise, I guess it's quite personal. How do you feel different from when you originally wrote it to performing it now? I guess, have you found this healing, or is it like a form of processing still? Like, how has it been for you, the writing process emotionally for this piece?
This is a very hurried piece, because I wrote this piece at the wedding in the toilet, and then I haven't read it since then. So this is the first time I actually read it. I was like, I'm just going to read it. So I kind of wasn't sure how I'm going to feel reading it. Yeah, so it's hard for me to answer that. I think I have to think about it a bit more. It's felt very, very nice to read it. I'd say it felt very freeing to read it, actually. It kind of felt like I wrote it and it was here, and now it's here. That's kind of how I'm picturing it inside. So yeah, I would say on some level it does feel healing to share poetry about that. I think also because it's such a hard, a weird feeling to explain of I don't know, feeling so othered, somehow feeling like there's a screen between you and people, there's this unspoken thing, there's this, kind of thing. So I think putting words to that has been very helpful for me in the moment, for sure. In that bathroom, it's been amazing to write this poem. I felt great afterwards. I was like, okay, I have written this, great. Now I can enjoy myself more. Yeah, and now reading it, I think, has brought it here a bit more. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really related to that piece. It's interesting that you've written it in terms of timeline, that it's a year on from your father passing, because for me, it's 4 years since my mum passed. And I use poetry as a really big tool personally to process a lot of the feelings, because my grandmother passed away 6 months before my mum. So within 6 months, I lost both of them. And I grew up in a matriarchal family, so those two were my anchors. So it was like almost losing the world as it is for you. And since then, I've done a lot of reading and learning about grief, and sort of in Western psychology, they talk a lot about this cycle of grief and the different stages of grief. But then I was introduced to a concept that actually feels far more accurate, and it's that there are landmines of grief. Because they come unexpectedly. There is no stage 1, stage 2, and it follows all neatly in a circle. It doesn't happen like that, you know. So 3 years on, 4 years on, it can feel very different. And that line that resonated with a lot of people, that was really effective with the repetition, that death sits heavy between us. For me, I could relate to that because it still sits heavy between me and certain people, even 4 years on. And I think it will continue to sit heavy with certain people because we don't have those conversations, because they're scared to have the conversation. And it also relates back to that point where you said they see me as the girl I was, or the woman I was before this happened. And it's interesting because we were having a conversation in the car on the way here, that certain people get attached to a certain version of you when they knew you, yeah? And they don't know how to move on from that version. So they know you in a certain period of your life, and you will always be that person to them. And it's very interesting because we all evolve differently. Grief is different for all of us, but when we evolve, we forget not everyone is on that journey with us. So they still meet you as the Anna they knew and expect you to always be the Anna that they know. And same with me. And losing a parent when you're relatively young in life, because we think that we should lose our parents when they're very elderly, and we're quite old ourselves and reached a certain point in life. And I think when you lose a parent young and other people who are your peers, so similar age, haven't been through that, they have no idea. They can't even touch the tip of the iceberg of how that actually feels and how it changes your world forever. So it's really interesting that a piece like that can resonate with so many different people in the room according to what they've experienced. But yeah, thank you for sharing that piece, because there's a lot that can be related to.
Thank you for that. That was really beautiful with the landmines of grief. I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, I just want to add on so because it's similar to a piece I actually did as well, and I know you must have heard as well. It's me talking about vulnerability. I did end of one of my poems called "This Not Trick." I literally say 1,000 tears makes one smile, and to me, it's like I see death as a transformation. Like in a way, death is around us 24/7. And what you just said is like, you know, people see the old you. That's a transformation. Then they can't accept themselves. So when we hear death, we think of losing a loved one, but it's like death is such a transformation. It's rebirth. So that poem right there you did, it was actually like you saying people, I'm a new version of me. Because you know, when someone dies, you form a new identity at the same time. Because it happened to me, I remember 7 years ago, I lost my granddad, and I was pretty pessimistic. To me, I lost him, I realized something. I can't be pessimistic, I gotta be optimistic, see the bright side of life. This person is gone, and yet I feel dead inside. So my mom wants to live life to the fullest. So I see death as a transformation. It's like a rebirth, like a phoenix, you're coming out. So that piece you did, yeah, it's like, it actually touched me and made me realize, like, you know, a part of me was dead inside, but I need to be alive more.
Just leading on from, you know, what's been said and your poem as well, I really, really relate to it because, yeah, I've felt that, you know, I lost my mum when I was really little, I was like 12, and at the same time my dad it didn't make sense him being the one that was left behind to look after us because he wasn't equipped. So it felt like a bit of an orphan state. and having to go through grief and all that healing, having to do that on your own as a 12-year-old is hard work. So I always needed like an anchorage point. So that's why I really like the repetition line that you had, because even at the time it must have felt like that constant reminder, like, oh, they're just not getting it, like, and I can feel this like energy, this negative energy between us, like, and things not being said that need to be said, and it almost feeling like a dark cloud, like a negative. But using that, even the line like death hangs heavy between us, even that heavy, the word is weighted, you know, but at the same time, something that's weighted, like an anchorage, it can reroute you and remind you, like, this is where I am, this is who I am. And sometimes that person that's passed away, even though they've gone out of existence, their weight, the weight of their life, their presence, the impact that they had on us, it's what then, it's almost like a tool, like a precious tool that can reroute us and ground us at times when we are feeling that grief coming back up. And those landmines, the memory of them, the strength, that can also be what protects you and saves you and helps you. It stops you from floating away in grief or foolishness. It reminds you, actually, I need to be rooted and strong. And it's a way of turning that negative, that loss, being able to kind of swing it into a positive. And that way, is it really a loss? Because their presence, it might not be visible, but their presence, it becomes very real. Like for me, my mum, she's not here, but she's here. She's here, you know? And that's, yeah, I think it's really beautiful and powerful. And it's like a way of coping, I guess, coping, yeah.
I like that imagery of the anchor as well, of the heaviness.
Even at 12, it was mad. I had this moment where, like 12 or something, I don't know, but where I felt like, oh, nobody's here, nobody's holding me, nobody's, you know, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, my mother was the anchor. She held it all together. That little woman held us all together, because the minute that she was gone, I actually felt the departure of everybody else, you know, and that's not okay. But again, generationally, a lot of the times, no, they're okay, it's fine. It's fine, don't give them a hug. No, we needed a hug. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes if you feel, I mean, obviously, like I've lost both parents now, and it feels almost like a double grief of like an adult orphan kind of state, but still very young. Like most of my friends have not lost parents. And it does feel, even though, you know, I'm not at an age, obviously I'm not 12, right? But it's like, I don't know, it's like the concept of an anchor is gone. So it's like, oh God, like I have to be my own anchor somehow? I don't know, it's a very weird thought. But yeah, I can definitely relate to a lot of things you're saying, especially when I was 18 and lost my mom as well. It felt like that.
I think it's one of those funny things in the sense where if you know when it rains, you know, in old people when it rains, and they say they feel it in their knees. I think that's like grief in a way. You know, you're walking through life, your knees are fine, then one day it rains, then you feel it, you know? So it's just living, feeling like you're fine, then something odd just reminds your body or your soul that something's missing or something's not the same anymore. I've not experienced grief, but I reckon that's what it feels like. That throbbing pain in your knee when it rains. It doesn't hurt, but it's a reminder, you know? And it doesn't go away, but we just unfortunately have to live with it. And that's one of the things that jars me about life so much. It's like this never-ending journey, and you just have to keep on going, and it doesn't, like, the world doesn't stop. My dad always says, like, time is not waiting for you, you know? You can spend all your time in bed, it's still going to be sunset, it's still going to be dusk, it's still going to be dawn. And we just, sometimes it's like,
You just speaking.
he's like, yeah. But yeah, I was gonna say a question to you. It's like it's personal, but you want to answer it. See your parents. What's the last advice your parents gave to you before they left the world that is stuck with you to this day?
My mom or my dad, or
both
of them. Last advice they gave to me. Let me think about that.
I mean, for me, when my granddad passed away, his last advice to me, which makes me laugh, it's like, Duncan, spend time with older people and stop drinking. I did one of them. I did one.
The last time I spoke to my dad, I was actually going to a poetry event. And he, I guess, said, oh, it's really nice that you have these poetry events. So I guess that could be a type of advice that's like, oh, it's really good that you're doing this thing, you know, like continue doing the thing. So I think that's a type of advice. And for my mom, I'm not sure there was a kind of last advice that I remember, but she was a poet, actually. So I have a lot of her poetry, and sometimes some of her poems like come to me in like symbols, like, or in dreams, like, or in places, like, you should look into this poem, and then I read that poem and I'm like, oh, and very often it's like relevant advice for current things in my life. So I would say it's kind of like ongoing advice from my mom that I guess I build different relationship to these different poetry pieces as time goes on. So that's like something that comes to my mind with that.
You get a different lens from your... like when you read your mum's poetry, do you get a different glimpse of what she was like, or is it just kind of affirming what you already know about her?
Yeah, I feel like every year, you know, there's this saying that like, I think some famous psychologist said it, that, you know, you're like the person dies, but your relationship continues. And I really feel that with the poetry. My mom was also a painter, so even with her paintings or with poetry, I feel like every year the poems I read, even though they're the same and I know them, I read them differently, and I have like a different insight of like, oh, interesting, you know, maybe she wrote it like this or like that. And obviously I never knew her as an adult, really, so it's interesting to have that image. You know, when I read these poems when I was 16 or 17, I just thought, oh, is this poem about this? And now I read it and I'm like, wow, it's actually really about that. So I think every year I get like a different, like a kind of different insight into her mind when she wrote these poems, I guess, as I mature and as I like understand things more. And also, I guess, based off of where I am in life, I keep kind of interpreting them differently as well. And I think that's the beauty of art, that you can see different things in the same piece.
And it's just like she's there for you while not being physically there. She's still there. Like, continue to have the conversations because she's listening. Yeah.
Earlier in July, Holly and I went to this amazing retreat. And when I got there, like, the place really reminded me of this place that my mom wrote a poem about. It was really, really similar. And I was like, wow, this is really similar to this place in Poland, like this little church that she wrote about. And then when I got back, and also I kept having dreams of churches on the retreat. It was like a theme. And when I got back, I read that poem and I really felt a kind of message in that. And I think sometimes it comes to me in little things like that. I'll see something and I'll be like, oh, that really reminds me of that thing. Or it'll be like a theme in my dream or something. And yeah, it really feels like a conversation. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, it's really beautiful that you have like those pieces from your mum. Because I think often, and I don't know, like when I think about grief and the people that you've lost, it's not just so much like what you've experienced, but you look forward like into the future and all that could happen that they're not then going to be a part of, right? And it's that grief of like the memories that you could have had and the time that you could have spent together as well. So you're almost like looking into the future and grieving all of the things, but you know, in that way that you kind of still have that ongoing relationship. And it's like you're reading these new pieces, right? Or you're reading the same pieces, but you're different, right? Exactly. So you're the thing that's changing and you're maintaining that relationship. So yeah, I was just going to say how beautiful that is. But then also, I guess it's so important that you're a poet as well, right? And that you're recording your own history, because we talk a lot about archiving and this idea of what stories are worth telling and which lives are worth recording, right? And a lot of people often feel like their lives are insignificant or you're not doing much and so you shouldn't be recording it. But I think all of our experiences, it's not about who else they matter to, but it's like your community, the people that you talk to, your loved ones, right? And you live and you tell their story. So it's just like, that's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
So my question is to you, it's like I have these hypothetical questions. do you think you'd be doing this stuff now if your parents are still alive, or something completely different?
I mean, definitely, like, I think, I guess in terms of poetry, I've always written poetry since I was like 8 or 9. I've written poetry. It was always like a love for me, a very deep love. But I think possibly my poetry would have, developed in a very different direction than a lot of my pieces. And definitely after my mom died, I had a very big shift. And I don't think I would have become a therapist if it wasn't for that experience, because I'm also a psychotherapist. And I definitely would not have gone down that path if it wasn't for that, like, encounter with grief and death. So in that sense, yes. And I guess in terms of my dad's death, I'll find out, like, how that will shape me more as time goes on. Yeah.
So, like I said, like, I wanted to take us through a journey of, like, accountability and, like, reflecting and who we are and what we're doing. And this is like a piece that doesn't necessarily have a name. And the reason why I wrote it, just a quick background, is just we live in this world where it's like, you're afraid of doing something wrong, and you're afraid of being judged for doing something wrong. And that feeling of being unsure of your actions and living with the weight of the actions, and worrying like, am I gonna be cancelled or whatever. So I tried to do it in the most poetic way I could. So here we go. From fetus to being born, I've been not only growing but transforming. My transformation from puberty to manhood filled with self-discovery and confusion. I am now a folk man, a sinner still learning, not realizing what I've done wrong, until the reaper shows me the seeds I've planted. Can I change? I vomit from the disgust of my harvest. Was this my doing, this desolation? In the rhythm of planting, I thought this was the perfect union of plant and soil. But looking back, through unreliable memories, the two S's might have been sorrow and sin. I look at my dirty hands, not from honest work, but from dark seeds. I realize my wrongs now. The reaper has shown me my carnage. But can I change? Even then, I did not realize what I was doing wrong. No one said a word, or was I always working in the dark? I can't remember. I am not a destroyer, but can I change? My eyes heavy with tears, my soul weighed down by the anvil of my deeds. I do not even believe I've done these deeds. They feel so alien to the person I am. I'm afraid of this darkness within. I feel ultimately entwined in sin. I'm sorry, but this man is not me. But can I change? I swear to be better, but can I change? Even if I plead my case, will the world accept me? I can't even speak when I see sin. My tongue weighed down by the stones the sinless used to punish. Do they not realize as well? I refuse to be a hypocrite. But all this wrong I see, can they change? I hope they can change, because that means I can too. So I leave my faith in humanity, a fool's choice, but so is hope. And that is that. Thank you.
You know what? That was a great piece. It actually relates to one of our poems as well, where I talk about, like, I repeat the cycle till I meet death. So in a way, it's like that poem right there is like talk about the idea of like growth and change and everything, and it's us continue to move on in life. But it was actually a good piece, and I could visualize it itself. Like, it's like someone said, like, we all pretend to be good, angel and stuff, but can we accept the darkness within ourselves to move on? I mean, that's the one thing I liked about your piece. Like, can you accept the darkness within you to move on, see the light?
Yeah, I think the entire point of it was just, it reminded me, or I just looked at, like, when we do things, you know, and you feel like you're doing it like in isolation, and it's kind of just imagine a farmer, you know, and you're planting seeds. The farming is, for all intents and purposes, good. But what you harvest from that farm, you know, does it disgust you? And that's why I wrote the line about, you know, like, I finally tasted my harvest and I feel disgusted, because these are my actions. I intended to be good, but at the end of the day, these are dark seeds I was planting, you know? And I wasn't aware, was I working in the dark? And why didn't anyone basically say, look, you're actually planting poisonous, you know, poisonous fruits? And for me, it's just, even though our actions might be intended to be good, sometimes we're being poisonous to the people around us. And it's like living with that weight of like, how can I say what you're doing is wrong when all I've been doing all my life is wrong? And can I accept that I'm wrong? Because would you accept me? So unfortunately, the only way I can accept myself is by accepting you first and forgiving you first. And so the moment I forgive you, I can finally forgive myself.
Yeah. I think that's really, really smart. It kind of further highlights this whole mirror concept. Like sometimes, especially in like very close romantic relationships, I think we get like triggered by each other and we're like, oh, he did this and this, or she is like that, da, da, da. Not realizing that in a different set of circumstances, you could be, and you could be that person as well. And you could be reacting in the same way that they're reacting now. And I think sometimes, yeah, we have to go on like a journey of being able to see that, like, wow, you know, we need to forgive others and see like that actually we're able to act in very destructive ways as well.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, I look at like, you know, like it's like the juxtaposition of like my mind, where it's like one moment I'm like, someone's being cancelled, like, he did that, you know, and I'm not forgiving that person. I'm like, I'm not gonna listen to his music no more. He did that, and then in that space of mind where it's like, oh shit, what if that was me, and I didn't mean to do that, and this person is basically feeling all these emotions, and it's like, I didn't mean to do that to you, you know, like, I'm sorry. And it's like the only way I can forgive myself, if that happened to be me, is by forgiving that person first and understanding that that person might have not been, you know, actively trying to do harm, you know. And that's why I said like fool's hope and like believing in humanity, that's a fool's choice, you know. But at the end of the day, what good is it if everyone on this planet is smart, you know?
I love the domino effect of your poems. Like, you put like these ripples in your poems, and it's like, it's you, community, the world, the universe, everything around. And the fact that you always talk about like reflecting on yourself, and reflecting on your actions and how they can have an impact on the world around. And it's the poem that you've just read as well. It reminded me of Confessions by Usher, but confessions in a church.
Yeah.
And it's like you're having a dialogue with yourself, and you're reconciling, and you're kind of having like a diagnosis. With, I don't know what your relationship is like with God, but it's I get a lot of that in your work. It's got this kind of element of faith, element of trying to be a good person and trying to make the right decisions.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I think the quickest or the only route to heaven personally is by being a good person, and that weighs on me, because there's so many religions on this planet. You're not going to hell because you don't follow mine. The entire basis and the foundation of everything is being a good person. So I'm always wrestling with being good. And I feel like I've made so many mistakes in my life, you know? You know, we all have these moments where we're walking together and you remember something jarring you did when you're in your bed, you're like, oh, fuck, you know? So I have those moments a lot where I remember like who I was and the things I've done, and I'm like, did I mean to do that? Who am I? Am I this person? Am I a good person? I want to be a good person. can I be a good person? Will they forgive me? Can I forgive myself? Can I forgive them? And okay, the only way I can forgive myself is if I forgive them first. And that's my...
But you know what, one thing about your poetry, it kind of gave me that Friedrich Nietzsche vibe, like the morality, good and evil, like about morals, like right and wrong. That's the vibe I got from that poem, which is good. There was a line you said that caught my attention, it's like how the reaper knows my deeds. And that got my attention. I was thinking like, because it's back to the conversation we talk about death, it's like the idea of it. Like what is good, what is evil, what is right, what is wrong.
Yeah. I think for me, it's like, it goes back to the religious point of view, where it's like you reap what you sow, and at the end of the day, Judgment Day, you're going to be in front of your maker, and you're going to basically express everything. You know, like in Islam, where they say like they just sit down and the two angels that you have beside you is going to mention your good deeds and your bad deeds, and you're going to present that to your maker, to Allah. And it's like that fear of like, what am I presenting to him? You know, it reminds me of this Japanese saying where we have three hearts: the one we show the world, the one we show the people closest to us, and the one we show ourselves. You know, and it's trying to keep that consistency between all three, and holding yourself accountable to all three of them. Like, who am I showing you? Am I who I say I am? And it was hard, but we try. We trip and fall, but like you just have to stand up and just like own up to it, you know?
I think it's amazing, your poem, and when you were reading it, the things that you've been saying, a lot of I said like I'm well versed in scripture, but things that is popping into my head, like you said, with forgiveness, you have to make sure, like people, I think they think that with forgiveness, it's almost like you're gifting the person that you're forgiving. Do you know what I mean? I don't know why I put that, but do you know what I mean? It's like you're if I forgive them, it's to them. But actually the first person that you're blessing is yourself, because you can have like bitterness, all sorts towards somebody. They don't know. They're living their life and you're there brewing. Like, why? You know, forgive them and let it go. And the first impact that is going to be felt is within yourself. So it's like gifting yourself. And then what you're saying with like being able to point out to somebody like, you know, they've done this, they've done that. Actually, I need to reflect on myself and what I've done. The reason it made me think of scripture is because there's one that I was reading recently, right, where Jesus was saying that you're pointing out the piece of something in somebody's eye and you're ignoring the plank in your own eye. Yeah. Address your stuff first, and then you'll see that actually theirs is not as bad. Do you know what I mean? So I just wanted to throw that in there. It's really powerful. I love when there's like these divine things that happen. It's amazing. Thank you.
Like for me, it's like, even like when I said about, you know, weighed down by the stones the sinless used to punish, it's because of like biblical sense, where it's like, you know, who hasn't sinned cast the first stone. And just understanding that sometimes those stones we carry weigh us down in a way where it's like we can't even accept who we are because we're weighed down by these judgments that we carry. And it's hard to speak in those moments where you have all this weight that you're carrying, and it just feels heavy. Like, can I speak on you if I've done something similar or something close to what you've done? And I have to basically accept that what I've done is wrong, forgive you, so I can move on to forgiving myself. And then that's the idea behind it. So thank you.
I'm really interested in the concept of forgiveness, because it's kind of a juxtaposition. I consider myself an empath, and it's only when I learned what that was, it all made sense as to how I react to things and what I absorb and what I don't. But for an empath, forgiveness doesn't necessarily come as easy as you would think it does. Mm-hmm. I do struggle with that, right? So I do believe that when you forgive somebody, it is actually a gift to yourself. You're actually letting yourself be free of that burden, of that burden of whatever feelings you're harbouring for that person. But the thing with forgiveness is, once you've done that, it's still, for me, it doesn't always reconcile with justice. And I'm big on justice. Not revenge, but justice, and what is just and what is right. So a lot of your poetry really kind of brings up questions of, you know, moralistic right and wrong and accountability and all of these things. And it's just really interesting to me. Why does forgiveness, I don't know, I mean, there's a million questions I could ask, but I suppose one of them would be, why does forgiveness come so easy to some and so hard to others?
I think from my point of view, forgiveness is, it's kind of like, you know, the classic saying, water under the bridge, you know? And sometimes, you know, that the water overflows and, you know, then all of a sudden you don't have a bridge no more. So you have to forgive enough to feel at peace. And also, this is fine to not forgive everything because you become overwhelmed by forgiveness in itself, you know? So at the end of the day, there's certain things you can accept and there's things you can't accept, and we're human. And that's the very nature of who we are. We must accept and choose what to and what not to accept. So I think just finding that balance is probably what I'm really big on, and just basically being less of a hypocrite as possible. Like, I think the easiest way to forgive is basically asking yourself, if I did what this person did, would I want them to forgive me? And if the answer is yes, then you should forgive them. If you find what you've done is inconsolable, then you understand why they don't forgive you as an empath, and you should accept it. Because I wouldn't forgive you if I did that to you. So just fine, I take it as it is, I fucked up, move on, you know? But if you can forgive that person, or if you want forgiveness from that person, you shouldn't harbor that, you know, negative emotion, because you'd want that to feel, you know? It's like the empathy thing. And that's the way to basically take your empathy into this positive feedback loop, instead of it being negative. Like, what would I accept? What would I reject?
Yeah, I think for me, when I think about forgiveness, I think the person that comes to mind for me personally is my father. And how certain things he's done, not just once, but repeatedly, that have affected so many people, including me. So it's really hard to reach that point of forgiveness. But then I read a poem the other day by Nikita Gill, who's one of my all-time favourites. And she writes about, in an alternate universe, she meets her father as a young boy. And when she meets her father as a young boy, she suddenly realises that maybe he didn't get what he needed as a young boy, which then made him act in certain ways or take certain decisions. And that was a game changer for me. That was very powerful, because when I think of my dad, I think about what I didn't get from him, what I needed. But I see him as my dad because that's who he is to me, but he's also his own person and on his own journey. And so you have to kind of separate the two and think, yeah, everyone is a person and makes mistakes. Like, yeah, so.
And I think it's also like we have to, I guess, consider how we define forgiveness. Like, what is forgiveness? What does that actually mean? Does it mean you now have to be, you know, super close to this person and talking to them all the time? Not, you know, sometimes it could, or not necessarily, right? So I think it's a very wide thing. Like, I think often when we talk about forgiveness, we make it sound like it's this one type of thing. But I think it really depends on so many factors. Yeah, exactly. It's a whole kind of like little universe of its own.
Just what I wanted to say was that and this resonates, I think, with what Anna just said, that I think that mistakenly we've been socialised into thinking that forgiveness means forgetting. And I believe that it is possible to forgive without forgetting what was done, because the fact is that there are certain people who have been harmful, and I need not to be around them anymore. But I can release them in forgiveness. So I'm not going around speaking bad of them. I probably haven't even told some people actually what they did. I have released that because I do believe that we are to forgive. And, you know, since lots of scriptures being dropped and everything, you know, there's that scripture that talks about forgive as Christ forgave you, or forgive as you were forgiven and stuff. But I think we are mistakenly socialised into thinking it means forgetting. And that, as you were saying, Anna, like, we've got to be able to be good friends again and all this kind of stuff. No. No, not at all. There are some people that, yes, you may be able to reconcile a relationship, but also you may know you've shown me who you are now and that I can't trust you with X, Y, Z. So it is wise for me to no longer trust you with that, but I can still maybe have a relationship with you. We can still have a certain friendship and I'm not harboring you in my heart, but I have learnt, you have shown me something and I need to take that into mind. And again, that does have balance because we can evolve and change, but I'm talking about from a point of view where you've seen now a pattern of behaviour and it's like, maybe we're going to part ways for this season and I can appreciate who you were or what you were in that time and I can release you in forgiveness. But I need to learn from the fact that actually you are not a person to now be in my circle or in my life and stuff, because that would actually just be me inviting more harm and more damage into my life. Do you know what I mean?
That's perfectly put.
Thank you. I feel like maybe I'll just echo what you've been saying already, but so I have 2 points. One is that when I think about forgiveness, I kind of like there's two things I can pay attention to is what is happening and why it's happening, which maybe like draws to why you said that, okay, what was happening was that I was hurt, but why it was happening was because the person wasn't maybe equipped to give me what I needed to do, needed to get. And the other point being that often I feel like we put the onus on forgiving the other, but I feel like often we need to accept that something's happened to us, and like that's what for me a big part of like forgiveness is that I accept that. Okay, if it's like a bad friendship, that I accept that, okay, this bad friendship happened to me, rather than being like she's a bad friend.
I mean, sorry, what I touch on what you said about father, because I think like some people who relate to that father thing, I see forgiveness, like especially when you talk about your father. If you don't forgive your father, that means you can't forgive yourself because you're part of who they are as a reflection. Because in a way, we're all a reflection of our parents in certain ways. And we look at them, you can see a bit of self in them as well. But to me, when I see forgiveness, like, it's like a quote from Frederick Nietzsche came up with. If I forgive you, it's like I'm no longer drinking the poison that you gave me. But also, I cannot trust you the lies that you perceive me as well. So trust is now broken. So like, when you read that poem, were you thinking about a place of hurt, or just like the idea of like you portray someone's trust when you read that piece?
I was writing from a place of sin, That's the mindset I had, where it's like, I'm looking at the world where everyone's pointing fingers, but no one on this planet can say they've lived a life free of sin, And I just felt like sometimes those actions or those sins we carry can feel so heavy where we're just searching for forgiveness. So we're basically, it's a bundle, it's like a forgiveness buffet because you're forgiving everyone because you want to be forgiven, And that's why I wrote it, because I was writing it from like just looking at the world and just feeling like, can I forgive myself? If I was them, would I be able to forgive them? And trying to accept all the wrong I've done and like accept my actions and also learn from them and say, okay, cool, what I was doing, like no one corrected me while I was doing it. But now that I think about it, was wrong, and I'm not going to do that again. It's kind of like, I'm looking at my hands not from, good deeds, because, when you go into the farm, I go back to farming, it's like, your hands are dirty from doing something good. Then you realize all you've been doing is just, planting dark seeds. And it's like, all you've been doing is just filling your life with poisonous fruit that you're meant to eat. And so you reap what you sow. And if no one corrects you on what you're planting, then you're just going to end up keep poisoning yourself. So I just wanted to write something where it was fine to have those poisonous fruits, just we know what not to eat. And then that's the ideology behind it. Because even like the best fruits are poisonous unless they're ripe. And so knowing when to forgive, knowing when it's ripe enough to say yes, to say sorry, to say my bad, to hold yourself accountable, is that idea of, ripening in your mind and just realizing that I was wrong. and I forgive myself, and I hope you can forgive me too, you know? And that's it's just the hope, just hoping for forgiveness, hoping for empathy, hoping for understanding, and hoping the world can accept each other, you know, like everyone can be in a room like, I did you wrong, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do you anything. Like we've all been there where like, you know, you question your parents, like, why did you beat me when I was like 2? And they're like, oh, I didn't know, man, I'm sorry. And accepting, you know, accepting it's like, you know what, I'll just allow you because I saw that my sister, you didn't do the same thing because you grew from that. And understanding like certain, like, if you see people grow in certain ways, you see people grow in certain ways where it's like what you did, especially in the home example, where it's like what you did with me, you didn't make the same mistake with my sibling, and you appreciate that, and you forgive them for treating you that way. So, and you have a certain level of resentment. Man, if I was born third on those slaps, I wouldn't have gotten them, you know what I'm saying? But you just accept it, like, oh, fair enough. It probably made me who I am to the point where I can guide them. It's kind of like being the guinea pig is necessarily you being the lighthouse, because that's what they see, you know, and that's what guides them. Like, okay, cool. If we wanted to get to this point, we have to follow the example or the path we took to get there, and we're not going to follow all those, you know, where there's rocks under the water where it can basically derail the ship or whatever. So you sometimes are going to be the person who makes the mistakes or who the mistakes we made onto. And you have to accept that, because that's just, unfortunately, that's just life. You know, sometimes you have to be the person that helps people learn. Yeah. And that's your place in life. And I don't think that every interaction is pointless. You learn something from everyone, you know. Like, if I mess up our relationship, I'm not going to move on to the next one and make the same mistake. It's sad that I made that mistake with you, but that's life. And it just comes back to how I view the world as grey. It's not black and white, it's grey. You didn't mean to be bad, you didn't mean to be good. Some people are just inherently weighed towards the other. And that's what makes the world grey in itself, where you hold, no matter how dark you have in yourself or how much darkness, there's still light there, so you're a grey person. Same thing with the amount of white you have in you. In the moment there's a bit of, you know, darkness in you, it's grey. So all these grey bodies moving through life trying to pretend that we're a different colour, because we are sinners, we are faithful, and it all comes back to knowing that one day you be sat there in front of the Reaper and confessing your sins, and you can't hide them. So that's my perspective from everything, more or less.
This reminds me of like this Instagram account I came across recently of this narcissistic guy. No, seriously. I mean, it's really great. And he posted this story where he was like, I created this account to like talk about my own narcissism and like stuff I've done, because I see so many people going like, they gaslighted me, they manipulated me, and I don't see anyone saying I gaslighted the fuck out of people and manipulated them, and like what was I actually thinking in that moment. And he's just like literally just creating these videos, unpacking. So this is what I did, and this is actually how I thought about it, you know. And you can see that he's like growing from that, from these reflections. And I think that's actually really beautiful to see. Someone saying, I did these things, I manipulated these people. And I think we all need more of that.
Yeah. It's something that you touched on there, I know. It's like, when you think that the world we live in, it's like just something called like toxic positivity, in a way. It's like, from a narcissistic perspective, like everyone's like, be happy, be this, be that, but it's like we don't talk about the downside, the gloomy side of things. Like, we look at social media, everyone's posting their accomplishments, but no one posts their failures.
It's kind of like positive reinforcement, you know? It's like, what good is it I'm gonna sit down here and talk about all the times where I fucked up that frying plantain, you know? Like, how many times I'm gonna talk about the day I got it so perfect. I'm gonna take a picture and I'm gonna post it. You don't need to see how many times I fucked up the dish. And it's important to also have at the back of your mind that the egg or that you're eating, the omelette you're eating, came from broken pieces. you know? And it's always to always remember, like, it was a work in progress. And everything you've done in this life, you've made mistakes during it. So it's like you've not woken up one day and we knew exactly how to do a backflip. It was, you know, you landed on your head a couple times. And sometimes when you follow people on social media and you decide to follow their path, you realize, oh shit, you realize this is what they went through. And you see this end goal and you can choose to say, okay, cool, that's what's on my vision board. I'm trying to get to that point. And in relation to excessive positivity in itself, I think you just have to have the discernment in your own mind to realize, like, these people are not going to share when they're down. The people who do, thank God for them, we're brave, we appreciate you, but the reality of the situation is you need that positive reinforcement, because if not, life just becomes meaningless. If everyone in your life is basically sad, what reason do you have to be happy? Because sometimes you need someone else's happiness to push you through your dark days. So at the end of the day, it's like, you need both. And sometimes you just have to, like, accept the reality of the situation. Like, they're not going to show you when they burnt the plantain.
I think you might be low-key hungry, I can tell.
I am, you can tell. My analogies has just been like food.
We're all hungry.
Yeah, I am. Yo, man, straight down to it. Like, you can tell I'm going straight to eat. Me? I'm 28.
Oh, same as me. Both 28.
You have old, what do they say? Old soul, old head on young shoulders. Yeah, a lot of wisdom.
I'm blushing, guys. Thank you.
No, but what you're just saying there is actually very, very true. Like, in terms of, like, you know, good and evil and stuff and variety. Because, I mean, it's just, maybe just me, the right thought process. Like, if I'm writing my poems, yeah, I think about the situation I'm in, but also the surrounding I'm at the same time. Like, me, it's like most of my poetry, if I had to write poems, it comes from a dark, dark place to shed the light to other people. And I think to me, it's like when someone does a happy poem, like, I know it's going to sound nasty rude, but it's like, where's the growth? Where's the struggle? You know what I mean? But everything comes from pain. And if you avoid pain, then you're not growing. Because you look at a rose here, it's beautiful, but underneath it's got thorns. And those thorns show you that it went through the pain to become beautiful.
I have to disagree with you there. I don't think everything comes from pain. And I think that we have been conditioned to believe that all art has to emanate from some deep pain. And I think that we should keep in mind that actually the more we learn to celebrate our joys is also part of growth.
Remember the plantain, guys.
Yeah, and I think, exactly. I think we learn so much from pleasure as well. I think, like, yeah, like pain obviously can teach us a lot, but also, like, pleasure, joy, all of that. Like, they're all really, you know, amazing.
It reminds you of when you're sick, you know? That's when life becomes so vivid. Oh, I can't wait to be, like, oh, I can't wait for this cold to go away, man. Like, I can't believe I didn't appreciate those moments. So those moments of sadness create, like, this deeper appreciation for life. But we go through life in itself with sadness as markers, as bookmarks, where it reminds us what we've been missing out on and not reflecting on the goodness that we've, like, you know, just been ignoring.
Yeah, and also I think the toxic positivity thing, there is such a thing, it does exist, but I think how to make sense of that, or how I personally make sense of that, is to keep it in perspective. So I think they say the thief of joy is comparison, right? So do not compare your behind the scenes to someone's highlight reel, and understand that what people present to you is what they're choosing to present to you. No, and it could be someone that is how they are building their self-esteem or their self-confidence, and so they are going to put positive content out there. But it's for you to, again, that word discernment, to know what to consume, because everything is about consumption now, right? So when you talk about spiritual hygiene, what are you letting in?
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. I'm going to use another food analogy, guys.
We're getting really hungry.
I'm taking this there. So, has anyone seen the TV show The Bear?
Oh my
I need to watch it.
I just finished season 2.
Exa-
Amazing.
Exactly. So you see all the chaos happening behind the scenes, then you see this magical plate of food that comes out of it. And that's just life in itself. You know, like all that chaos needs to exist to create beauty. And that's the only way you appreciate the meal. And that's where the chef receives joy. Like all my stress, you're receiving this food and you appreciate it and you feel my love from it, you know. And I think that's goes back to the saying of, you know, the way to a man's heart or the way to a person's heart is food, you know what I'm saying? Where it's like that act of service of feeding someone is so vital in our human essence, because it shows a deeper love in the sense where you are giving me life essence. You've chosen to stay there, to sweat, to give me life and to give me energy. And that's why it's so important to understand that chaos creates beauty. And only in chaos would you appreciate beauty in itself, you know? I think that's it.
I mean, you touched something that was quite interesting. Where you said, like, you know, serving person giving something. I mean, to me, it's like when I hear that, it's like, what exactly you giving? Because you think you're giving someone that thing to someone, but in reality, they might not want it in the long term. So it's like you gotta question yourself: am I actually giving it for them or for my own sake of ego?
Well, in that instance, that's your choice, isn't it? Like it comes from food. All right, food. I'm sorry, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. So that's my theme. Yeah, that's my theme. So it's kind of like if someone says to you, "I want to eat something," I can go cook another thing. What are we doing here? You know what I'm saying? Like you've provided what the person wanted, but it's not really what they want. So it's basically understanding the other person and understanding what they truly want, and not just acting from your own desire. And that's when it becomes selfless. And that's the entire thing about being selfless, you know, choosing to let go of your desire to serve another person. So you also have to remember that this person also has their own wants and desires. And can you basically acquiesce to those wants and desires? And if you can't, then you're probably not ready to serve. So, you know.
Amen. You need your own podcast.
Someone needs to come in with all the food. Who is serving us?
That's what your caption should be for when you get the footage of this.
Who's serving today?
Who's
I was
serving
going to
today?
say, I was going to call it plantain.
You can tell I love plantain.
Like, the way you write poems, and then we'll go into the next poem, like you just have like your vernacular, your vocabulary is very kind of steeped in what I kind of see as classical. So like whenever I hear your poem, I just imagine it being like a timeless piece that's written like 500 years ago or something. Don't make me cry, man. So I just wanted to say, like, do you see yourself as, are your poems an amalgamation of like all the thing, every little thought, every little feeling you've had, and like, are we gonna see it manifest in some sort of like physical book or?
Well, first, inshallah, but secondly, like the reason why that really touched me is because like the entire point of like my writing is I want it to be found 500 years from now, and it feels like it relates to the human experience, not the now, because everything, I might be talking about the moment in time, but I'm doing it in such a way where I'm speaking to the soul, so to speak, where I'm speaking to human experience, you know? It's kind of like basically reading, like, I've read lots of like books from like philosophers and stuff, and I try to like embark on this journey of philosophy and finding themes in everyday life and like seeing and hearing things and feeling like, okay, this might mean something else, and explaining life through those simple things, you know, like the rain, like puddles, and like you know, like farming, what it really means, and looking at the mirror, what that means to me, and just everyday things that we go through in life, trying to make it as deep as possible. Because for me, it's like that eureka moment where you're doing something, like, oh, this is what this means. And I try and convey that in my writing. And I'm happy that you saw that, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, I have a very short poem. You reminded me actually of a piece I started writing called The Menu of Life. And it's like a running metaphor. It's a running metaphor that came to me in a car with Holly. I somehow said, the menu of life. And she's like, you should write the poem about that. And I'm like, yeah, I should. And it's a kind of like running metaphor about the different choices we make and how we pick our food and how like we're influenced by other people. Like, oh, they're ordering this. Maybe I should get that. So just reminded me of that with all your food analogies. Anyways, we're so hungry now. Yeah. Well, I have a very, very short poem. This is like a page poem that I wrote. I write a lot of short page poetry as well as spoken word, so I thought I would share one of these. And it's called A Love Poem to the Sides of Me I Tried to Ignore. It's very short. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I tried to shove you under a rug I got from family. An outdated gift, you know. The rug where all the unwanted parts of anything and everything have always belonged. I'm sorry I only acknowledged your existence in the depth of the night, with shame as my only witness. I'm sorry I've put so much of you in the hands of others, your existence calculated and judged on their scales, not realizing they have their own rugs to clean. I see you now. I love you now. I'm throwing the rug out. I'm here. That's it. Yeah.
That was like such a perfect line. I don't know, like, did we plan this?
We did it. We don't even know each other.
I think you guys complement each other really well.
Really cool.
The fact that you guys are both 28 is amazing, because I get to see so much from. To me, you guys are young. I'm not saying that anyone my age or above is old, but I was just. Yeah. What I loved about that piece was like the metaphor of like just, you know, sweeping things under the rug, and then obviously this what's under the rug is something that's attached to you, or a part of you, or a facet of you, and the idea of like you reabsorbing that back, and this kind of idea of acceptance. And we've kind of been talking about you know, different sides of ourselves, and just, you know, trying not to be embracing the flaws, because obviously I think once we do that, then we become more forgiving of ourselves. And I think that the act of throwing the rug is an act of forgiveness, like we were talking about. Was there a point or something you heard that made you want to write that, or what are you accepting? What is the thing being anthropomorphized there?
Yeah, I mean the original prompt. I think actually this poem, kind of after I wrote it, it became about a lot of things somehow. But originally I wrote it about sexuality and about being bisexual, the experience of being bisexual, and I guess kind of like always knowing that's there, but somehow ignoring it or denying it for myself, or somehow being like, well, that's not really real. And somehow like also allowing other people to define that for me, or what that means or what it doesn't mean, what qualifies as being bisexual, what doesn't qualify as being bisexual, you know, all of these different things. I think it can be a very confusing thing. And I think for a long time, it was something that I didn't really, even though I was always a very kind of accepting person of these kinds of things in others, I think I just didn't maybe somehow acknowledge it fully in myself, or love that about myself. Yeah, so that was my original prompt, actually, for that.
I like the phrase that you said, like, shame was my only witness, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, that, I just want to say that was actually a really cool line.
Yeah, so this line was actually to me about internalized homophobia, because before I actually came out as bisexual to myself, I would like sleep with women, but then I'd be like, well, I'm not bisexual though. So I think there was a part of me that knew this was there, but I was like, oh, but that's like not really me. Like I would make up kind of excuses for that, of why that wasn't really, somehow it didn't count or something. So I think there was a lot of shame in that somewhere, even though it's like, I'm not sure why, like I can't logically explain it. I think it's more a visceral feeling. So I think that's kind of what that line was about.
I think this piece is so beautiful for me because it's like, it's so simple, but like the depth behind it. Like everyone here can relate a certain feeling to that piece. And for you to be writing it from that deep point of view, it's like, you can basically, it feels like a reflection, you know? It feels like everyone here sees something different in that piece. And hearing that from you brings back to your point about explaining your poetry to school kids. Year 10s.
It's like if you have internalized homophobia.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that. I would never have guessed that was the inspiration or the prompt to that. And for me, that even makes it even more profound. Just knowing that it can come, something so simple can be that deep.
And I think that also kind of shows what you were saying about the like poetry, sometimes talking about the human experience. Like I think sometimes we have this experience of like not acknowledging a part of ourselves or shoving something under a rug. And for me, that might have been one thing, but you heard that and you're like, yeah, that thing for me. And so it's like that in itself is part of the human experience. It's not the content, it's the process sometimes. You know?
Did you say that this poem is called Menu of Life?
No. That was a different thing.
I'm still hungry.
It's not the menu. So this was called A Love Poem to the Sides of Me I Tried to Ignore.
Okay. Yeah, this poem really resonates and it's beautiful. The technique is beautiful. The brevity of it. I was going to say, it reminds me of something I actually posted on Instagram about how to love yourself. And it's just basically a thread of different poets and their interpretations of self-love. And they've all shared like small sections of their work on it, like small little sections. I wanted to know, how do you practice self-compassion with yourself? How do you practice self-love? Because self-love is such a broad topic and it's different for everyone and it's complicated as well.
Yeah, I think kind of like I wrote in this poem, it's like throwing the rug out and saying, I'm here and I love you. And I think learning to do that for different sides of myself. So after I wrote this poem, as I was reading it back a few times, I kind of saw, oh, like this could actually be about so many different things. It could be about a lot of shadow work or a lot about like disowned, you know, kind of things you don't really want to see in yourself. And I think for me, like self-love with these kinds of sides of yourself is acknowledging them and actually loving them as well. Even the kind of like more, I don't know, let's say toxic parts of you, I think they often exist to protect you and they often exist for a reason. And you need to sometimes love that part of yourself, in my opinion, for it to actually loosen its grip on you. So I think it's acknowledgement and love and like saying, whoa, like I appreciate this side of myself, or I appreciate what this makes me, or like how that shapes me, or how this side of me has shaped me, or how this side of me makes me who I am. So I think it's really acknowledging. Yeah.
I was just going to say thank you for reminding us of the power of short form poetry. Myself, that's a reminder I need, because I tend to think, or I did tend to, not anymore, I did tend to think that the longer, more narrative pieces that take you on this very intense, thorough, intricate journey are ones that, but actually, because of how you constructed it and the analogy you used, it didn't need to be any longer than it was. It was perfect. And short form poetry can be powerful like that if it's constructed. So, well done, you.
Thank you.
I want to touch on that, what you say. I mean, you're listening to a poem, yeah. It took my mind differently the way, when you said like, you know, someone gave you the rug, to me, I think of family generations as in characteristics. And you decide to be the cycle barrier. breaker, breaking the cycle of the family generations characteristics. Because like we all got, like I said, back to parents and grandparents' role, it's been passed down generation. Until you see it, acknowledge like, okay, this is a toxic pattern that's been passed down for years. Let me break that cycle. And then the minute you try to be the cycle breaker, everyone turns it on you. And to you, it's like you from the rug. It's like, look, this is toxic, guys. I'm pointing out to you guys. We need to throw the rug away.
Yeah. Well, I guess like that's the, like, again, the beauty of poetry, that you can interpret it in so many ways, right? I think for me, yeah, like definitely, I think it's like cycle breaking, you know, all of these things. I think the rug can also be just like the ways that things have been defined as well, you know, like what is a relationship, or what is important, or what does this mean? What does that mean? Like how you need to live your life. It's like a set of rules, I guess, as well. Is how I thought about it. Definitions.
You know, we can call it the heirlooms of judgment. Now would be the best way to put it. You know.
You're just like you're like a walking poetry right now. You know that you're like a walking book. Yeah.
Just on that point of short form poetry, and I think that for me, I also think it is also a real skill to leave room for people to interpret the way they want to. Because as the people who are writing, you know, we are taking people on a journey, and we can take them to the point that we want to take them to, or should I say maybe the point that we're writing the poem for. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think it's really great when we can leave that room, that even though we're writing from a place of our particular perspective and how we're doing that whether it's because of not specifically mentioning the topic, or whether it's just in even just leaving things without punctuation or whatever, just leaving space for people to meet it where they meet it. Because as was said, you know, everyone was probably picking up different things from that. And then it brought us to an even deeper level because you shared what it was about, but because people could just almost come to it blind, do you know what I mean? And just so I'm sure each person kind of connected with different lines in the poem. And that also just, that whole idea about sharing with schools and stuff, I think one of the greatest things might be to actually just literally, if you were ever to do stuff in schools, just say, just as you're listening, what particular phrase or line hit you when you heard that? And then ask them to say why. You know, why was that particular line or phrase? Because it's like, what are they grabbing from that? And then, of course, being able to share, this is where I was coming from with that, but just giving people that room to be like, you know, it was that word about throwing the rug away. Because that's very powerful, actually throwing the rug away, do you know what I mean, sort of thing. Why did that speak to you? Do you know what I mean? And stuff like that. Because also sometimes when we've done some, whether you want to call it growth work or whatever, sometimes there is something that can be repurposed. But actually sometimes we need to chuck that thing away. You know what I mean? It's done, and we need to throw that thing away and not have it. So anyway, yeah, just those few thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, what you just said actually got me thinking as well. Like, the way throwing the rug is symbols so many things. You could throw away a relationship, you could throw away like a friendship. It's like everything. It's still throwing the rug. It literally symbols a lot of things. And I think it was very good. Like that very short poem you did. It's like I said, few words but a powerful message. And I think it was like as poems, like, you know, when I first started, I used to think my poems used to be long, but then obviously you said like the shorter it is, it just gets the message across.
Yeah, because I guess sometimes poems can be like the essence of something. Yeah. And again, you don't even need to mention what it's about. Like I wrote it from that perspective, but I think the essence of that process was to me more important in this poem than this particular story that I wrote it about. I think it was more the essence of the feeling and that process. And I think short poems like really kind of convey essence of things.
It forces you to get to the point.
And like the point is often the process and not the content, I feel. The specific content.
And I'm also guilty of like forcing myself to even lengthen the piece. Because it's like you're writing like, 2 more lines, you know? And sometimes it's like when you print it out and it doesn't feel the page, you're like, is it right?
Actually,
you know?
it doesn't feel the page.
Yeah, I understand.
The poem is an island.
Sorry. The poem is an island. I got a poem called
Nice plug.
My Love, and basically
the poem is an island on the page, and then the negative space helps form the shape of the poem as much as the words do. So yeah, I obviously I love haikus and I love short pieces. I actually write a lot of short poetry, and there's actually a skill in the brevity of writing short pieces, because to be concise, not to be superfluous with words, and not use words to an excess where it's just like straight to the point. And also like the thing about short poems is, for me, like they're easier to remember, and when you impart those words to someone else, like in this room, you're planting seeds in everyone's minds, so that for when they go home or when they are living their life 20 years from now, they can probably remember that poem, and that stays with them, and that's a gift that you give. So yeah, there's a magic to short piece poetry.
Yeah, I think haikus are a very beautiful form as well. Like when they give you a specific structure, it feels like a kind of little home you have for yourself, and you're like,
I call the haiku like they're morsels of wisdom.
yeah, they're really, really beautiful. I love haiku.
I'm just curious because I want to pick out both your brains. Like, which poets, like, do you get inspiration from? Like, you know, when you write poems, like, who like grew up. So my question is, like, poets that you grew up reading books from that inspire you to write kind of stuff.
Oh my God, there's so many. Sylvia Plath, I love so much. I love her poetry. I think it's amazing. Holly, your poetry is really great. Nilofer, your poetry is amazing as well. So you guys are very inspiring too. Yeah. There's a Polish poet I really like, Wisława Szymborska. She actually won the Nobel Prize in literature. But yeah, she's really, really great as well. Yeah, I'd say probably Sylvia Plath and this Polish poet are probably my two. Also Emily Dickinson, amazing poetry for like every mood. You can read her poems and see everything in it. Yeah.
I think for me, you know, it's quite tough. Apart from the one piece that made me love poetry, I actively avoid reading poetry because I feel like I didn't know what that ideology was from until Missy Elliott basically said it. And she said when she wants to record an album, she locks herself in a room from outside influence. So it's like, I want my poetry to be as pure as I want it to be. So I avoid, the only time I consume other poetry is if I'm in a room with other poets and they're sharing their art, and I feel so inspired that it makes me write. But if I read it, I feel like I might end up being Picasso and stealing, you know? So in that moment, I avoid reading other poetry, unfortunately.
But don't you feel like writing is a bit like driving a car? It's like you need fuel. If the car doesn't have fuel, it can't go. So in the sense that poets are petrol basically, and they put that into your car and then you can go. If you don't have that, then how do you kind of, like, an artist needs art to be inspired, you know what I'm saying?
And I 100% appreciate that. And it just comes from me being a weirdo. It just comes from me being a weirdo.
I would say to that, poets are people too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So poets can be fuel, poetry can be fuel, but I think what's nice about this space that we've had today is this blending of not being obsessed with what is page poetry, what is structure, what is performance poetry, what is spoken word. If we're talking about any kind of art form being an expression of us as spiritual beings having a human experience, then what does it really matter? And I think different people have different muses. So I completely understand the perspective of not being around too much poetry or not reading too many poetry books to then inform how you write, because your perspective is very unique to you. And then and at the same time, I think a lot of new poets on the scene would feel that coming to a night like this where there wasn't an open mic opportunity, that's not the place to be. But actually, spaces like this can give you more inspiration than any other type of event because of the conversations that it's opened up. So it depends, and a bit like what you were saying, it's where you're at. So everyone in this room will have received something different today because you're going to meet whatever you've heard with where you're at the time.
I mean, it's kind of interesting what I said to another poet as well. I asked him this question: does he consider himself like a philosopher? Because when I see poetry, I feel like we're all philosophers in our own way. Like, we're all telling stories. And like we said, and I see it as like we all got our own books. It's up to someone to like read it or listen to it.
Yeah, I think for me it's like I try to draw as much inspiration from everyday life and having eureka moments in everything. And someone said to me, "Isn't life stressful that way?" No, it just means I'm constantly seeking beauty, you know. And for me, it's being in that state of form where I'm like looking for meaning in everything. It's stressful, but there's meaning in everything we do. And can you find that eureka moment from doing the simplest of things?
That occupational hazard of being a poet, right? Yeah. So it's like, I think it's within you. It's within you. Like, you see things through a poetic lens. Yeah. So if you watch a film, there can be one scene that inspires you, or you hear a piece of music, and it's how you interpret that. And I think that the way we interpret things and make sense of the world through poetry, through history, poets have always done that, is one, they're commentators on what is going on, and two, it's using that art form to make sense of the world. So we all do that in different ways, but I forgot my point now, because I'm hungry too.
Give what food our heads.
The next one is not about food, don't worry.
There's going to be so many poems about planting food.
I was pointing to the toilet and now I have the mic.
You better talk.
Awkward. Maybe I'm supposed to have the mic. What shall I ask? I resonate with both of you. I don't read poetry. I like to watch and listen to poetry. That really gets me inspired. But the page poetry I read is what my friends send me. They'll be like, I read this and I thought of you. And then they'll send me things and I'll be like, oh. So I've started reading it, but not so much to be inspired by like a whole book of a particular poet. It'll be like little snippets I'll have that people have sent me that inspire me. But no, I echo everything you've said about it's all about the human experience, and that, yeah, we're putting words or a voice to a lot of unsaid, that space in between, again, that liminal, the emotions that people can't always articulate, and being able to put that into some kind of narrative story for people to then process. I think, yeah, you'll get your fuel from anywhere. So whether it is reading, whether it's listening, whether it's just life. I mean, some of us have to come away from the scene to live life a bit, to then come back and be like, wow, I've had all these experiences. I've got all this new material, but because I was so in the zone of coming to open mics that I've just been in that space, I've not had any space to grow or, you know, reflect. Again, like that self-reflection is really important. So a question. How have you found like your journey from when you first started writing and performing poetry, like to now? Do you feel like you've guided your journey with, this is the direction I want to go, this is the new stuff I want to write about, or do you feel that it's just been kind of like a flow of life? So maybe your style has changed, or like because you're a different person, your voice has changed within your writing. I'd love to know like how you feel about your journeys from when you started to now.
Well, I've always written poetry since I was maybe like 8. I remember when I was like 8 years old, I would just look at things and be like, there's a cat, I'm going to write a poem about the cat. Oh, we're on a road trip, poem about the road trip. So just literally anything and everything. So obviously, as I got older, the poems became more about feelings and thoughts. Like first they were very childish, like, you know, literally stuff in the world. And then it just became more like thoughts and feelings. And I think I never really thought about it so much as like, where do I want to take this? I think it was always a part of me. It's always felt like a part of me. Like I can't not write poetry. Like I will always write poetry, and it's like the most obvious thing to me. It's how I like translate life. It's how I process life. So I think I've always written it, and I really enjoy sharing it with others as well. And like finding spaces like open mics was like, oh my God, this is a thing. Like I can actually share all this stuff I write here. Yeah. And I think when I got more into spoken word, then I started writing with some intention. So all of my page poetry is just like stuff that comes to me and like inspiration and often like at random times. But then the spoken word stuff, like my real man poem or this woman poem, some of these things, or like a few pieces I have about climate change, some of these have been like, whoa, I really want to find a way to address this in a way that would be a bit funny, a bit sarcastic, a bit different. How can I make that happen? So for these pieces, they've been like very intentional in spoken word, but page poetry has for me just been like I need to write. Like it's just something I will always do. And then I also enjoy sharing it. So, yeah.
I've got a question for both of you. This is about the architecture and construction of your poems. Do you start off with an idea, or do you just go into it, or do you like an idea comes and then you slowly create like the spider web of the poem? How do you give birth to the poem?
For me, I use the analogy of like an itch, you know. So, you know, when you start, you just, something's itching, and then you start, then keep going, then you finally stop. So that's how I write and express poetry. The idea is the itch, then I keep writing until it stops itching me. So that's literally my means of like expressing poetry. Yeah.
I think it depends for me. You know, like some poems, like again, a lot of my page poetry is like I have this, like I need to go write it. Or even the way I wrote this death poem, I was at this wedding, I was having this experience, and I kept having this line in my brain. Death like sits heavy between us, and this line just kept like fizzing around in my brain. And quite often that will happen. I'll be like walking somewhere, or I'll be somewhere and I'll have this line. So then I just went and I just wrote this line, and then it all just came, and then I just wrote it all in one go. So quite often I'll just be like, I'll have this line that's like fizzing around, and then I'll go and I'll just write it, and then it will come. And that's how most of my poetry is born, I would say, and then I just write it in one go. And sometimes I edit it, sometimes I don't. But then with a few of my spoken word pieces, like the climate change or the real man, I have actually sat down and been like, I want to make this sarcastic and like this and like that, and how am I going to do that?
Strategic step up. Actually, not strategic, but like you've had like the ingredients is.
Yeah, because for that, I guess I thought about it more as a performance. I'm like, I want to make this a performance with a message, so I need to like really think about it, kind of. But then most of my poetry is like I have this line and then it just happens. Or sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll be like, oh my God, I have to write this down. So that also happens.
I think for another thing I'd say to it is it's very funny because, you know, sometimes like the line fizzing in your head, like most of my pieces are literally born from the first two sentences where it's like I've written these two ideas down and I'm just going to keep writing to that flow. And I'm like, okay, cool. I've written this first stanza. The third one has to relate to the one before. And I see a theme. Before I realize that, I was okay, cool, I have a theme here that I'm following. And it's literally just basically making sure I'm making sense between like what you're saying or what this next stanza is as a reply to the previous one. And that's how I write. So it's kind of like, okay, I've said these two things. What's the conversation that's going to come from those two things?
No, I'm just hearing you guys saying this. That's very interesting. It gave me insightful as well because, like I said, you're like a walking poetry book. You know that, like literally. But I would say both you, like the way you guys, like I said, compliment each other is very interesting. Like you bring the psychology side to your poetry, and you bring the spiritual side. So to me, it's like why I write my poetry. It comes from psychological, like outside the box. And I think being weird is actually good because you're like. It's actually a beautiful thing, being weird. Like, I think as poets, we're naturally born being weird. We're just weird, and I love it. Because we think outside the box. When everyone's in the box, we're like showing the door to people, like, there's more to life than this. But my question is, like, you guys, do you think, like, poetry is like a form of therapy when you see it?
Well, short answer, yes.
Yes, of course.
That's it.
Of course it is.
I think.
Shall we do?
Yeah, I think my final piece.
Have you guys done an equal amount of poems?
I'm about to do this, and this is my third one. And this one is also like nameless, but I wrote it for I wrote it for someone, or not necessarily for the person, but about how the feeling exists, more or less, or expressing that feeling in itself. And it goes, the analogy is weird, but bear with me. I've always been envious of those who could ride bikes with just their legs. Those who have mastered the art of letting go, hands-free enough to accept love. I've tried to take one hand off at a time, but each time I felt it wobble with my resolve. Afraid of falling. In this, I've always been a coward. But who likes pain? So I spent my journey with both hands on the wheel. The wheel of time turns and I've learnt to pretend it's a choice. So I've spent my days, till the eve I met you. In that moment I realised I'd need both hands free. We spoke and I sensed you were like me, searching for a reason to truly let go. I felt safe in those moments, safe enough to not be afraid of pain, free enough for the floor to look like clouds. This felt like a warm summer's breeze. I felt brave in those moments, brave enough to let go, brave enough to close my eyes and let go one hand at a time. One hand, two, I wobbled for what felt like eternity, in that moment of indecision between eternity and an end. Then I felt a hand steady mine. I saw you were trying to. And we smiled, for we knew this was what we needed. Someone to make us feel like we could fall. Laugh and cry at the stupidity of fear. Someone to be brave for. So we faced the sun together, hand in hand into every sunset and dawn. With her smile, it dawned on me, it wasn't fear. I just needed a reason to let go. A love so grand, I needed both hands to accept it. And that's it.
Damn. That spoke to me so many ways. Like, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Charles Gambino's song, That Power. No, you listen to that track here, that power. It's like the way you explain, like, you know, I had to let go of the wheels. Like, it spoke to me in a way. It's like the idea of death of vulnerability, of, like, you know, just being yourself, and able to surrender to, like, your authentic self. Because I think that's one of the hardest things that us humans do. We struggle to be ourselves when trying to figure out who we are at the same time. But this piece right there, it spoke a lot of volumes.
Yeah. People always say, like, I just know him for the love poetry, but I really think that you are the guy when it comes to love poetry. I think just
Thank you again.
Just like with Anna's poem about the rug, the extended the idea of, like, you know, gravity and the bicycle and then the wheel, and this idea of control. Also, like, the idea of balance and the bike, and then just the idea of gravity pulling you down and the fear of falling and pain. That all links to, like, falling in love. And there's just a lot to unpack with this short piece. And you write it so well. So in terms of, like, the idea of, like, letting go and then having that echo near the end about having to let go to accept something greater with both hands, I think is a beautiful image.
I think the reason I was walking, there's a story behind it, is I didn't know how it felt, and I was trying to explain it to myself. And I was walking down the road, I was coming back from the gym, and I saw someone riding their bicycle, and it reminded me, like, I always wanted to ride my bicycle without my hands, and I was never able to because I was always afraid of letting go of the wheel. And I realized I was at a point in my life where I might have to let go of the wheel, and that's the only way I would be able to accept what was being offered to me. So I said, this is that moment. And looking at that bicycle going down the road was like, this is what you're feeling. You want to let go, you want to feel the wind in your face, you want your hands to be free, and you're safe here.
There's a really powerful line in there where you said it wasn't fear, it was that I needed the reason to let go. something. I don't know what the exact verbatim, but that's really, really powerful.
Yeah. It was a very powerful like reframe of that fear. Instead of being like, oh, I'm in this fear and being very like, you know, closed up and in the fear, you're like, actually, this allows me to have something, to take something.
Thank you.
Wow.
It's got this like nostalgic aspect to it as well, of like just being a person that loves to ride a bike and testing out life, like that great metaphor of being on a bike and then falling down and then learning that you have to fall down sometimes to get back up, and the whole idea of trust as well and friendship. I like that in the piece. It kind of conveys a lot of different emotions, and as well, I felt like this poem, with the whole idea of letting go, the whole idea of letting go has so many different volumes. Like we was talking earlier about grief, but then we was talking earlier also about different things. But it's along the lines of letting go. And it's like, oh yeah, it's so universal.
Yeah, I think for me, like the nostalgic bit was like, it reminded me of my childhood. Like I wanted to do this, but I never was able to. And bringing that back to me being a grown man, quote unquote, trying to reflect back on that inner child who's basically yearning for a reason to let go and not be afraid of, you know, hurting myself and having these injuries and having these scabs. And also coming back to a point of like accepting. Because how can you accept something if your hands aren't free, you know? And for me, it's all about just being in that feeling of freedom. Because I'd never, like, that was the envy. Like, they looked so free when they rode their bikes without their hands. And I always wanted to experience freedom in that sense. And that's why I think love is. That freedom where you feel like you don't have to carry everything. Your hands can be free because you have that love and that safety, like, enveloping you. And it's like, the floor now seems like a cloud.
And even if you fall, it was worth it. It was
Exactly.
worth it to feel that and to...
What you're saying is interesting, because when I listen to that poem again, you talk about the poem, it reminds me of the idea of trying something new. Because we're all afraid to try something new. Like, we always get that perfection idea in the head. Like, writing a poem or anything, it's like, we want to make sure it's perfect the first time. Not realizing the first step's always the hardest steps. Yeah. And, you know, letting go of that idea of being perfect and say, look, telling yourself it's okay to make mistakes is what makes you human.
Yeah. I think for me it was all about focusing on like that decision between eternity and an end. And like that decision is a split-second decision, you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, you can choose to end this or you can choose eternity. What's your choice? You just have to choose. And coming to the decision that the only way you can accept and receive eternity is basically by letting go and receiving. So it's just coming to that decision. It's like, you know, everything is about crossroads in life. And that's another part of the piece where I try to liken it to riding the bike on the journey and just experiencing life, this never-ending piece. We come to different crossroads where are we letting go? Are we falling down? Are we okay with everything that's happening? Are we going to make a decision between now and forever? Like, choosing the right thing is hard, but accepting your choice is probably the beauty in life, more or less. Thank you, Norris.